Harris. Can we get a read-in before I open this for public comment?
We can't, is this Josh?
Mr. Shaw online.
This is the one. Is this on? Well, I can- Is Mr. Shaw online? Yeah, okay. Mr. Shaw, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. You hear me?
All right. So the staff report is in your packet, and I'll ask Mr. Shaw to elaborate or correct anything that I share with respect to this. But this is conditional use permit application 03-2022, submitted by DDG Acquisitions LLC. This is for tax map parcels 382 to 82-16A and 382-2-8217. These properties are in the Resort Commercial District, and this application, it was submitted for either mixed use, let me get the verbiage correct, for mixed use, commercial and residential, or vacation cottage complex building. The determination was made, so I'm kind of skipping ahead, but that vacation cottage complex building is not applicable, so this application truthfully, or in essence, is for mixed residential commercial use. You will see in the staff report the additional requirements that this project, it would be subject to, including parking, floodplain overlay district ordinance, Chesapeake Bay Preservation Act, landscaping provisions, any other provisions applicable that are contained in the ordinance. But with respect to the application that was submitted, the drawings that have been submitted, and the requirements of the RC district, it has been determined by staff that this project does meet the requirements. It meets all parking requirements. In fact, the applicant met the parking requirements with 3A that was approved recently. So additional parking that is attendant to this particular project would be above and beyond the ordinance requirements. So all requirements have been met. And again, jumping ahead, you will see that the staff recommendation is to approve with the conditions that are set forth. And just to reiterate that one of the first points I made, condition number 1 clarifies and sets forth that the recommended approval is for the mixed residential commercial and not for the vacation cottage. But the other recommended conditions are set forth, and perhaps I could read this after the other discussion, right?
Yeah, we'll open for public input and then we'll get to more details. All right, at this time, I'll open it for public hearing and that time and this time are different. It's 5:34 p.m. I'll use, which is the time on my phone. I had 2 people signed up. Ms. Reimer.
I did not sign up to speak to this particular issue.
Oh, do I have the wrong sheet? Ms. Larson then?
There was confusion about.
Other
the
one?
sheet we were supposed to
You signed up
use
for the other one?
For which topic?
Okay. Is there anyone who would like to speak to this topic?
Is this regarding the text amendment to the resort commercial zoning ordinance?
There is no text amendment to the resort commercial zoning ordinance.
That will be later during the planning commission hearing. The joint meeting will recess, and then the planning commission will have a meeting and including a public hearing on that issue.
Oh, that's why I didn't know what she was talking about.
That's what
Yeah. Okay, you're here for
Yeah,
that.
down to that too.
Okay. I don't see anybody coming up, so I'm gonna close the public comment period at 5:35.
Was the letter to the
Oh, I'm,
letter?
okay, all right. I retract the closing of the public comment. I didn't realize it was a digital one.
Mr. Ron,
I've been putting a floor in today. I did not check my email.
it's okay, I've been all over the East Coast today.
Okay. That's impressive. Okay. All right, any digital comment then?
Okay.
All right, was sent in by Mr. Rob Bond, the owner of the Riverview Inn. Says, I cannot be present today for today's meeting as I am out of town celebrating my 20th wedding anniversary. I write on behalf of B&K Hotels LLC. And B&K Pier Rentals LLC. Accordingly, I am allocated 6 minutes to speak. I ask that the mayor read my full statement instead of only a portion as she has done in the past. I fully understand that the decision has been made and that the public meeting is a formality, as evidenced by the town council and the planning commission having a joint meeting to facilitate the developer's needs and not the interests of the town itself. I also fully understand that my comments will be dismissed as a disgruntled anti-development person who is trying to limit competition to his own business. Neither is true, but I don't pretend to be able to change minds at this juncture. I am very pro-development, but more precisely commercial development. When the planning commission and town council approved this conditional use permit, they will have accomplished turning the historic resort commercial district, and more specifically the waterfront, into a primarily residential district, all to suit one developer's objectives and business needs. The promise for selling the town property at 55 cents on the dollar was the promise of revitalizing the downtown commercial district by bringing in new businesses that would draw both local and visitors to the downtown area. Phase 2, former school board office, bank building, and chamber building, was to be all commercial. On March 2nd, 2022, the town, without public input and behind closed doors, changed the development agreement from commercial to mixed use, effectively giving the developer a CUP even before there was ever a public hearing on the issue. Phase 2 is now primarily residential school board building, 100%, bank building 50%, and chamber building 50%, at a total of 2/3 residential and 1/3 commercial, with no actual businesses slated to occupy the third except to the extent the co-working space fits that category. Just as concerning, the town and developer characterized this phase in a manner that required no additional parking for the development. Phase 3 was to be not less than 10,000 square feet of retail uses on the ground floor with between 24 and 42 dwelling units on the floors. In the same behind closed door agreement that modified phase 2, the town modified phase 3 to reduce the commercial to 7,500 square feet, the dwelling units to between 8 and 20, and agreed that the developer only needed to provide 40 parking spaces, which included not only golf cart parking, but on-street parking on Taylor in front of the property. Again, the town agreed to a CUP for the benefit of the developer before and without any public hearings. Somehow, phase 3 became phase 3A and 3B, with 3A being the parking lot between high tides and the town pier. Phase 3A, as ultimately approved, has only 3,044 square feet of actual retail space. The additional 3,000.
I'm gonna go the full 5. There's 2 more minutes left.
Okay. Phase 3A, as ultimately approved, has only 3,044 square feet of actual retail space. The additional 3,320 square feet labeled as retail is nothing more than a covered patio with no actual retail use, and retain the minimal 40 spaces, including street parking. The approved development, which is not yet broken ground, but must be completed by May 20th, 2023, eliminates the existing Willie's restaurant, which is approximately equivalent in size to the proposed commercial of phase 3A. In short, it's a net zero of commercial space, as well as creating significant additional parking nightmares in the historic core. Which brings us to the current proposal. Notwithstanding the staff report that this application is for a mixed residential commercial use, the actual application says it is for a mixed residential commercial use and or vacation cottage complex building. This characterization is specifically to take advantage of Article 13-2C of the zoning ordinance so as to reduce the on-site parking requirements. This in turn arises from the August 9, 2021 letters written by the prior zoning administrator, Kathleen Easley, that have meritless and tortured interpretations of the zoning ordinance to facilitate the development. Notwithstanding the staff report that the developer proposes approximately 1,200 square feet of retail space, There is nothing in the CUP application that refers to or commits to retail space. I specifically requested the documentation on which the staff relied for this statement, and none has ever been provided. Even if there is 1,200 square feet of commercial, the total between 3A and 3B is 4,244, less than half of what was the predicate for the development deal in the first place. And still only 56% of what the town agreed to behind closed doors in March. There are 18 proposed parking spaces, the absolute minimum for the multifamily dwellings, and nothing for any perpetuated commercial use.
Was there another one?
The other one's for the PUD,
Oh, got
but
it. All right, with that, I will then close the public hearing at 5:42. And just to clarify, public comment, as an individual, when you speak, you get 3 minutes for our bylaws, but if you speak as a group, you get 5 minutes, and Mr. Vaughn claims he is a group. So, reading session. Next stage. Oh, well, we'll do a presentation of each one and then place them in for, is that good?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, bring the applicant up.
Yeah, we've got a presentation on the Zoom if they're able to share their screen. You'll have to- Oh,
And she's driving.
yeah, they can.
yeah, Steve will.
He should be able to do whatever he needs to do.
Steve or Brian, you should be able to share your screen now, if you can hear me. Yep,
Is it good?
yep. So, good evening, everyone. I'm Adam Tiller with the Dodson Development Group. I'm joined on Zoom with Brian Ditzler from the Timmons Group, our civil engineer, Steve Zorner from Cadis Design, our architect, and Duke and Preston Lloyd are also on the call. We just wanted to give you all a brief presentation of what our intention is and our plan is to build on this parcel at 114 Beach Terrace. See if you can go to the next slide. So we're essentially trying to build 12 residential units that will consist of 8 one-bedroom units and 4 two-bedroom units. We'll have 2 ground floor commercial bays that are 600 square feet each. The bays will face the boardwalk, and we anticipate smaller vendors like a hot dog stand, ice cream vendors, what's currently out there on the boardwalk, hopefully finding a home in these bays. And we estimate that we'll complete this sometime in the summer of next year, if plans go accordingly with the planning commission stuff. So Brian, I'll let you speak a little bit more to the site plan. It's fairly straightforward as just a quarter-acre parcel, but if you can kind of speak to that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Adam, and good evening, everyone. Again, this is Brian Ditzler with Timmons Group. As Adam mentioned, our site is located along Taylor Street in between Wilder and Denison, with frontage on the boardwalk, obviously. We have configured our spaces with our commercial frontage on the boardwalk to maintain consistency with other uses as we make our way along Beach Terrace. And we've also got our flanking residential uses on the north and south sides of the site. We do access from Taylor Street with a 2-way drive aisle that's 24 feet wide. And from that, we make our way to 18 parking spaces on site. I will mention that we have 44 spaces on and off site on the phase 3A site, and that provides a total of 62 parking spaces between phases 3A and 3B for this development. Steve, you can go to the next slide for me. There we go. Similar to other properties along the boardwalk, there is a minor amount of floodplain on this property, so we will be elevating our first floor elevations to a minimum of 3 feet above the base flood elevation, and that's reflected on this exhibit, as you can see with our commercial uses as well as our residential uses. Stormwater management will be provided on this property in accordance with state and local regulations. And we will be connecting to public utilities. All are located within the boardwalk at this point. With that, I'll let you take it away, Steve.
Thank you all, and good evening. My name is Steve Zerner with Cadis Design Group. Just wanted to briefly touch on our architectural vernacular. Within your guidelines, design guidelines, you had given two options there for Victorian style or resort cottage. So what we had decided to do is go for more of a craftsman style vernacular that adheres to the resort cottage. So as Brian had mentioned, due to floodplains, we elevated the first floor. We can get some parking underneath that in two of the three buildings, and then the third building along the boardwalk, we've got our commercial spaces. But as just to go along with the resort cottage vernacular, we wanted to group the windows. We've got some cantilevered balconies here for the residents and their guests to overlook the Potomac. Straightforward, low volume. We have some gable ends to give some architectural detail, and then along the lines of what your standards were as the continuous and horizontal bands to try and break up the building. So typical coastal style colors and just overall just design vernacular. As far as connecting the three structures together, we are proposing a covered parking trellis, and we can add some vines or some form of potential vegetation, some plant life over that to try and give some visual interest. But that's how we're going to connect and make the three buildings contiguous for the use of the mixed use.
Just a couple other things, because Steve, I think from our angle, it's hard to tell what color scheme that is, but that's like a light green coastal color. We also tried to make this continuous and similar to the design S3A, so that when you're looking out from the boardwalk or the river, it looks like one continuous development with a similar architectural theme. But I think beyond that, we're open to take any questions you all may have about this development.
Okay. I'll let the staff go next.
Okay,
Yeah, we don't have plenty of time to ask them
Okay.
questions.
it's just, it has to do with what he's showing us and what I'm seeing that was sent to me. And it's different.
Okay. Do we have
So I
that now
don't
then?
think, yeah, I don't think do we have copies of the bird's eye view of what it's gonna look like?
Yeah, Steve, can we go back to slide
No,
4?
that's,
Oh.
yeah, that's the, looking at it from the front, I mean, the bird, that one.
Yeah.
And I can't see it up there because it's too small.
Yeah.
I think I saw it in,
It should be included with the
this page here.
Is that in there? You see?
It doesn't have a page number, it says C3.0 on the sheet page, but like the, yeah, by the way. Yeah.
Steve, are you able to zoom in a little bit, like full screen?
I think that's on the other side, she's gonna view at the top. And then put the presenter. It's C3, you find it?
But I'm hearing you say buildings, but I'm only seeing two
Yeah.
buildings.
There's three,
So-
they're on top of the parking.
There are 3 main structures that are connected.
Oh, okay, all right, thank you,
Okay,
okay,
yeah, got it?
yep, thank you.
All right, we'll go with staff now.
So just to reiterate, staff has reviewed the application, reviewed the drawings, and at this point, staff finds that the application as submitted meets the requirements of your zoning ordinance, of the town zoning ordinance, meets the parking requirements and any other requirements found in places other than the RC zoning district ordinance, so it meets other requirements in the zoning ordinance, and further meets the requirements of the development agreement. So it is based upon those conclusions that staff recommends approval of the application CUP 03-2022 with the following conditions. Number one, this conditional use permit is in all conditions listed below is for the mixed residential commercial use of buildings located on property identified as tax parcels 3A2-2-82-16A and 3A2-2-82-17, known as 114 Beach Terrace. This conditional use permit shall run with the land, but may be revoked by the town of Colonial Beach or its designated agents for failure by the applicant or its assigns to comply with any of the listed conditions or any provision of local, state, or federal regulations as applicable. Number two, the hours of operation of the commercial uses of the building shall run from 7 a.m. to 12 a.m. Number three, a separate entrance for access to the second floor dwelling units shall be provided. And one dwelling unit is on the ground level, so if there is a desire that could say to dwelling units, in other words, you could strike second floor, it could be to dwelling units because that is a part of the design anyway. I don't think it's necessary, but because it is part of the design and it is required, that the purpose for the first floor, the ground floor access is ADA, so it would be required anyway. Number four, external illumination on the parcels shall be shielded to direct light and glare onto their premises. Said lighting and glare shall be deflected, shaded, and focused away from all adjoining properties. Number five, provision of street trees and landscaping for the off-street parking and the site shall conform to the applicable sections of Article 13, parking, and Article 24, landscaping provisions of the town's zoning ordinance. And number six, the development shall be in accordance with the objectives of the town of Colonial Beach's design guidelines regarding site layout, architecture, and other elements as identified in this document.
Okay, I'll give it over to planning commission.
Do we have any questions for the applicant from the planning commissioners? Mr. Christensen.
Sorry. Mr. Dissler, on your demolition plan, you show an existing light pole to be removed on the northern border, about 50 feet west of the walkway. I just want to make you, if you aren't aware, that is not only just a light pole, that is a platform for osprey nesting, and there is an active pair in there right now. So I just want to warn you that there are probably people in the town be very disturbed to see that removed.
I certainly appreciate that comment, and that was something that we noticed during a recent site walk out there. We will have to look into possibly relocating that in close proximity to where it is today, but that's certainly something that we can consider during site plan review.
Thank you.
Mr. Hubbard.
Oh, if you leave your mic on, the people online be able to hear, so you don't need to turn your mic on.
Just move it over.
Pick up the ambient stuff. So with the parking for this parcel specifically, not this joint with the other one, but on this one alone, is the parking that you're proposed being met within just the boundaries of the parcel, or are you using a combination of what's there and on-street parking?
So this would be a combination between on-site parking and adjacent public parking within 500 feet of the site. The adjacent within 500 would be used to meet the commercial parking demands.
Can you give me a number on how much is on the on-street parking piece?
Sure. Our requirement is 7 spaces.
Thanks.
Of course.
If I might add, that is in the current ordinance. That is not something that is unique to this project. That is in the parking ordinance and in the current town ordinance for inclusion, when you're establishing parking requirements for inclusion of on-street parking within 500 feet.
Are we gonna do like a question for the applicant and then a question for staff session? Or are we gonna go back and what's the process here?
We'll let the planning commission do your thing and then
As long as we can keep this moving along, I think that it would be best to go ahead and get that interactive dialogue so that we can make this a timely meeting.
So I guess this question is probably directed to staff. So there have been comments about this parcel and the other parcel sort of being lumped together and jointly being looked at about it, how it meets requirements and how they can use each other's. But the reverse wasn't really true. So when we looked at the other parcel, there wasn't, this design piece didn't exist. So we weren't allowed, we're only sort of like allowed to look at it in one direction, but not in the other direction. I mean, this sort of seems like a strange process. And if staff can sort of explain to me the two phases components and whether or not these properties are essentially permanently joined, even though they're not contiguous.
There are two parallel in this instance, parking requirements. I'll use that as an example. There are two parallel sets of requirements in play. The two projects are not the same for purposes of the conditional use permits. That has parking requirements, but in addition to that, there is the development agreement, there are the development agreement requirements. And for purposes of the development agreement, that was drafted as phase 3, which includes 3A and 3B, which were separated into two CUP applications. So for purposes of the CUP applications, of course, which is before you tonight, that is its own set of parking requirements for under the ordinance. But in addition to that, we just wanted to reiterate that we haven't lost sight of the fact that there's another tangential set of requirements, and that those two have been met. But those, for that purpose, just under the development agreement, the two projects are together.
Thanks. So it seems like for the purposes of what's in our lane, this parcel is just this parcel. So the comments about like how this is added up with other commercial percent, I don't think those are really germane really to our examination of whether or not this conditional use fits. I think this is an island essentially. And it's probably just as germane as what other businesses are doing with their on-street parking as it was to just this one, at this point, jointly owned developer piece. So I guess as a relation to that, do you want to go into what I asked as an extra piece of material to be added to the meeting to try and give us some understanding of how this actually looks? Because I think a visualization of what we're talking about, I think staff has brought some additional materials they haven't shared.
Yes, and Heather, can you pull up that item that we talked about? So the request was what parking, basically, I'm going to paraphrase, but what parking looks like in this particular area of the town. So at your seats, council and planning commission are brochures of the town parking. If you can rotate that counterclockwise 90 degrees, if possible, I know. You have that shows the parking available in the town in various forms. In addition, we because of limited time constraints, we just hand drew on what you see on the screen. That shows just the RC district. Go back up where you were. There you go. That shows the parking in that particular in the RC district, and so the black line shows the boundaries of the district, and if you see the asterisks marked at the corners, between those asterisks plural, is where you also have on-street parking as well. So in addition to the marked colored lots, those streets also have on-street parking.
Thanks. And the other part, which I understood through conversations before the meeting, isn't available, which was, I think this is the case, that I asked for some depiction of what existing uses don't fit within their footprint under the current regulations in terms of how much strain is there already on the area from existing uses that sort of don't fit on what this brochure says one would think is happening. And I believe you said that would take some additional analysis that we don't have.
Correct. The town does not have an inventory of properties that currently exist that may or may not meet the parking requirements. And that would beg the question also of whether they would have to meet the parking requirements, because if they were in existence prior to the enactment of the parking ordinance, then even if they do not, they wouldn't have to meet the parking ordinance. So that would be another question. So, but no, town does not have an inventory of those properties.
Yeah, thanks. My line of point on this is there's some uncertainty as to what's really available as we continue to, particularly in the RC, add more things that we assume will fit within the public space, right? The publicly usable space. Which, if this was just a commercial piece, that it just is what it is. But I think really the dialogue's a little different when we're looking at the conditional use part, because now we're really changing the possible mix, because we're adding residential and commercial, whereas if it was just commercial only, it would just, it would just go through the normal process. So I think it's another way of looking at this to think about, because we sort of, I hear this anecdotally by people in the area, like, large events, things like they don't fit, only people who park there are sort of like the employees, and that everybody's already sort of using what's already there. And I don't think that really our brochures really sort of show that. It sort of believes that there is available flexibility. And I think at this point, we're just lacking some key data.
Yeah, and that circles back to the digression that we had about the parking study that was done, along with the additional data that's being collected by the meters. And as this is a rolling process, that it's a continued analysis. It's not a finite thing. And as we get more data, we will be sharing that and including that in this decision-making process moving forward. But this is the best information that we have at this time.
If I have the latitude of a question for the developer. So as this originally, like, if you didn't ask for the special use, you just used what you were allowed to do on the property, it would all be commercial. And I understand the idea of doing mixed use, but beyond that, there's actually some vacant space. There's actually literally like a hole in the structure, the way it's been designed, which would seem to limit the possibility of having a larger commercial use. Can you speak to why that was sort of a necessary aspect of this, or is it a necessary aspect?
So are you asking why residential was a component we wanted to add, and why is that the question?
I believe the part along the boardwalk is not continuous commercial use, right? Isn't it like there's some space and then there's some empty space?
If we could go back to that, we have boardwalk facing commercial space with residential on top of that and a breezeway in between. We thought that this parcel, given its size, this was about the best we could do, given the demand of commercial space in the town as well. But we thought that these types of space sizes, 600 square feet or so, would be ideal for what we'd like to program by the boardwalk. Smaller vendors, they're already out there in a sense. That was what we, from our market analysis, figured was the best use. And we also wanted to maximize parking on the site, given the town's concerns, rightfully, about parking in this area.
Yeah, I can clarify now that I know your terminology you're using for this. Speaking of what you're calling the breezeway, which is a piece that's not actually serving nobody's living there, or a business operation piece. It seems to be an architectural feature, but it sort of changes the ratio of what could otherwise have been if it was the whole boardwalk was commercial.
I'll let Steve speak closer to this, but I think that's our access. We also have the stairways up there to access the second and third floor units.
Yes, sir. Thank you for the question. So originally what we were planning was a little bit of additional commercial space, but in order to get our accessible route from Taylor Street up to the commercial space, we had to remove some of the commercial space and then add the switchback ramp. Again, this is just all per ADA. And then this central spot to get some stairs up from grade from Taylor up to the 3 foot above base elevation or base flood elevation. And then this stairway then goes up to the residential on floors 2 and 3. Let me get to, let's see see. Yeah, this is the elevation. So right here you can see that this is blank right through here, and this is where our switchback ramp is. So right here. So this elevation 3 is you're basically standing at Taylor looking at the building. So this is left out, as Adam had indicated, for access, and then our stairs to get from the grade up to floors 2 and 3.
And this is not achievable on the ends. Is that sort of the idea? Or behind on the back facing, the sort of the parking lot facing piece? Correct.
Yes. Due to building constraints, setback constraints, this was, and also please keep in mind that the length of what a switchback is required for a maximum slope of 1 to 12. So if we're going up, 40 inches, then that's going to be a 40-foot long plus level landings at your switches. So it just requires a lot of running distance for the ramp. So this was going to be the best use of the site to do a switchback right there. And the possibility of doing it outside of the building square footage, we have this accessible parking space here to satisfy, again, ADA. We have to have a level access aisle serving that accessible parking space. So between the 24-foot requirements for our two-way drive aisle setbacks, this was the most the solution that made the most sense.
Thanks for clarifying.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Will.
Mr. Matt, did you have something to ask?
Thank you. So, can you hear me? It's this thing. One of the questions I have is, as far as the commercial space, when you say a couple of 600 square foot bays, how many bays are we talking about? Is it 2?
2.
2. And are they on opposing ends of the beachside building, or?
Yes.
So they're on opposite ends. So when we're looking at this elevation with the front, I'm trying to understand where so there's stairs in the switchback coming up. Are the doors getting into this? I'm trying to figure out where these.
Are you on
spaces
C3?
are.
Yeah, could we zoom in on this, like the top right corner? Sorry.
It's like micro small.
Yeah, there we go.
I'm trying to distinguish the difference between, because there's a residential one that's in this building as well, on the first floor?
No, there's no first floor.
There's no first floor residential in any of those?
No.
Okay.
There isn't, period. No, not in this at all.
So on the.
Right.
I thought there was one of these back buildings, an ADA accessible
That's
the thing.
what I'm getting at with this one.
That's in 3A, so I'm sorry.
Are there any ADA?
I don't believe so. There's not a unit on the first floor, so and we don't have elevators.
Is that a requirement of any kind? It's not?
Okay, so I can clarify the building permit for the ADA thing is that they are doing a switchback ramp in here to comply with ADA. The other one, they are not doing any ramping, so they have a first floor unit. This doesn't require a first floor unit because of the switchback ramp.
Right, but there's still no, the ramp doesn't go to the second floor.
It's public versus private access.
Right.
So there's commercial space needs to have ADA, private space above. There's not a requirement for that if it is not over certain size and it is not oriented towards that accessibility.
Okay, the only reason why I'm asking that piece of it is because in the last cup that we did for a mixed-use commercial residential that had apartments or residential spaces on an above ground floor not accessible by an elevator, that only had stairs, in order to have an ADA in order to meet ADA accessibility, they had a ground floor.
Because of the number of units and
on the fourth spot.
And also, they
Egress
didn't want to
distance.
install an elevator, and that was the
Right.
reason for the ADU
Okay.
unit.
I want to clarify though, this is a CUP hearing and the building code.
But I'm just trying to, I think you answered my question. There is no requirement for an ADA. Okay, that's all I was trying to get at. And I was trying to clarify where the, commercial space was in this because it, P19, hard to see. And I'm slowly going blind again. Not because of this. Otherwise, for the applicant, I don't think I have any questions.
I had a question of the applicant, or actually staff. Do we have any performance criteria as part of the general development agreement that would preclude this development from taking, a year or more to complete and causing that disruption to the boardwalk?
I'll let.
No.
Yeah.
No, we do, no,
There's no performance criteria.
there's no time frame. There are there's a performance agreement or a development agreement, but the timing, well, let me correct that, because there are time constraints following closing, when the development has to have occurred. Whatever is agreed to under the development agreement has to have occurred, or there would be a forfeiture of some.
Yeah, my question really is about, how it's going to impact the boardwalk. And if we see construction taking, months and months at a time, that's something that, we want to know about. And, given the constraints of the supplies and lack of, workers to build it, I don't want to see us have big piles of, debris piled up on the boardwalk where people can't access it and so on.
So that's,
It's 24 months, I'm sorry, it is 24 months for that. It's not in the conditions, but it's under the development agreement.
And the last question that I had was with regard to the front-facing structure on the boardwalk. It looks like there's two bays for cars to park there, and it looks like they're going to be able to park right up on the beach almost, right up on the boardwalk. Is that the case?
I don't believe so, Steve. Could you go back to the site plan? I think there's two, looks like mechanical closets or electrical closets that are blocking that one space. Or Brian.
Correct. Yeah. So there's one parking stall right here under the building, and then yes, these storage, and there's going to be mechanical for potentially a domestic water pump or something like that. Anyways, that's going to obscure the car from the boardwalk.
Any other questions? No. I asked a follow-up to that in my original quick comment about this. Originally, the idea being that this would be all, the status quo, it's all commercial. It seems to be an odd use of our waterfront space that we're using. The proposal is to, there's an architectural constraint that's been built into this to have a staircase that's not parallel to the beach, but perpendicular to the beach, and mechanical closet storage area and car parking. Where I think that the original vision was this was, outside of this CUP application, that this was just a row of continuous commercial use along the boardwalk. I thought that was sort of the vision that sort of predates me, but that's my assumption, at least. If there's any clarification on that sort of tells me whether I'm, my premise may be wrong, I guess is what I'm asking. And if my premise is not wrong, to ask, are there design modifications that are possible to relocate some of these pieces in a way that would allow the original intent of, commercial being in the RC to be more viable for at least the waterfront facing piece, because we don't have very much.
The development agreement for this piece of it never included commercial. So this is in the right direction. The development agreement for this piece never included commercial.
So the development agreement is sort of forces there to be a CUP, is that sort of how?
No.
That's what I'm wondering, so if it's my understanding is the current use is commercial, if you're saying that the
I don't
development.
know what all of the permitted uses are in the.
One permitted use is live work units.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think there's multiple kinds of alternative residential permitted uses by right.
I don't think that the commission was ever told that there was no commercial in this though. So, if that was in the development agreement, we weren't informed of that.
I don't understand the question
Because we
related
assumed
to
there
the
would be
top.
commercial along the boardwalk.
So I'm trying to
There
find out
is
whether
a
the basis of the cup is whether or not we're going from an understanding that this part of town is commercial unless somebody asked it to be something else. And the something else that we're being asked to do is add in some residential, or in this case, a majority residential. Or is there like sort of a different baseline that, am I misunderstanding sort of what the baseline is, I guess? Does staff, I think
what the baseline would be is if instead of calling it residential, if they didn't have the commercial space and they just called it vacation rentals, they wouldn't have to do anything and then there'd be no commercial space at all. It would just be tourist homes, vacation rentals, Airbnbs, whatever you want to call it. So
that I'm tracking, but I
So
thought that staff said that was even being thrown out as
well,
out of consideration.
that name had been put into the application. That used to be put into the application, but it's not relevant because you don't need a cup for that.
I
That's
think
a by right
the,
thing.
bread and breakfast are already a by right in this district already. So they would.
Correct. They would not need a cup for that.
But it's not bed and breakfast, it's residential.
Right, right. But what I'm saying is if they didn't have the residential piece in there and they just used it for vacation rentals, which is in there as a by right, they wouldn't have to do this. This would have zero commercial stuff and it would just be vacation house. Vacation. Right. But what she said earlier, what the attorney said earlier is that that's irrelevant for the cup because the vacation cottage is by right.
No, it is not. This is
It's
John
not,
Trump.
it was determined that the definition did not match the proposed development. John,
Correct.
sorry.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
You can hear me? Okay. A vacation cottage complex is defined as three detached buildings that would be for purposes of providing something that would be akin to, well, vacation cottages. I mean, but ultimately, this is what you proposed with the commercial component, the mixed residential commercial component wouldn't satisfy that requirement because you've got one of the buildings with a covered deck that faces the beach terrace. That's one of the buildings. And the other two, if you consider those to be wings, would only be 2 units. Even if they were detached, it doesn't satisfy the requirement of a vacation cottage complex because there have to be 3 detached buildings. So therefore, that would not meet the requirement. And also, a vacation cottage complex is not a use by right. It would have to go through the conditional use permitting process.
Okay, well, that was my misunderstanding. That's my apology.
I'm sorry.
But live work units and tourist homes are by right.
And also, a bed and breakfast is a use that's by right, which would be the use of the building that used to be the old school board building. That potentially can be used as a bed and breakfast, which is a use permitted by right in the RC zoning district.
I think that helps. So what we're being asked to approve is in lieu of those by right uses, to approve this mix, correct, in lieu of those uses.
As part of the guidance from the comprehensive plan, which is in the staff documentation, and Mr. Shaw specifically called it out, where, let's see, area encompasses all of the parcels along Washington Avenue, areas along the boardwalk and smaller section of Colonial Avenue. Mixed use development with commercial and residential should preserve the historical integrity of the area, which implicitly states that we are encouraging mixed use in the RC.
So, is there anything in the guidance that gives us some basis of trying to figure out whether it's 50-50, 80-20, and you can pick which one is 80-20, right? Or is that
No.
a discretionary question?
The short answer is no, Mr. Knuckles. No, there's no proportion, as it relates to that. The definition specifically, as it relates to mixed residential commercial use, is as a building which provides commercial or office space together with one or more residential units. It doesn't specify the number of residential units. When you get more than one, it just says one or more. So there's nothing in it that gives you guidance specifically of a ratio of 80-20, 70-30, or anything of that nature. It just simply says that, and that's the extent of the basis under which a determination can be made that this can be permitted as a conditional use.
I was just going to add that the comprehensive plan also recognizes our interest in becoming a Main Street designated community. And of course, their focus is commercial, particularly in the downtown area. So in that sense, it's in conflict.
No, their focus on Main Street is absolutely mixed use, 1000%.
Yeah.
This is
Where commercial is downstairs and residential is upstairs in that scenario.
which is what this is.
Well, again, it's 1,200 feet of commercial space and 3 units of residential. So it's the comparison, I don't think is accurate. That it's
VHC.
It's 1,200 square feet, it's tiny.
All right, so for the issue before us this evening, we're kind of seems like we answered questions and moved on, so we're winding down. So I need to get a motion before us on whether or not we are going to adopt and recommend the CUP application with the staff recognized conditions, or if we would like to add anything else to that.
Can I just ask, can we get consensus, because we've all asked sort of different questions about different things. One, it seems like we can get consensus that mixed use makes sense. Is that in fitting with the RC to have a mixed residential commercial piece, right? That's maybe like a baby step. And then the next step is the ratio that's proposed once you get to that baby step also compatible with what the vision is for this part of town?
So the ratio part is not necessarily in purview of this. So what we're looking at is land use compatibility. And so we're looking at how does this impact the site and conform with, and what is the non-conformance? So what are the conditions we have to place on that?
Well, I think there is a nexus, right? Because the nature of the flow of the day and the impact on the neighbors, right? Which is part of what we're supposed to look at. It's like not what's happening in this parcel, because like that's their parcel, right? They should be able to do it. But we're looking at it's like how it affects the things around it. And residential uses, which are sort of a 24/7, 365 uses, is of a different nature than a commercial. I mean, folks could argue whether it's better or different, but it's definitely different in terms of how much it occupies, what the usage is like, what the assumptions are in terms of traffic impacts and traffic flow. I think so. I don't think that we should be agnostic to whether or not it's a commercial or a residential or any of the other uses that they could have asked for. Right? I mean, they only asked for these two, but in terms of as those impacts on the zone, I think that is germane, because that's. It seems like that's the only thing that's really before us are those uses that are being proposed appropriate for that area, in which case you go from it not being by right to saying, sure, you can do that.
According to our comprehensive plan documentation and what has been laid out, which is what we're using as the basis for decision, it's not arbitrary. It's what's laid out there, that as we move forward, the vision for the RC district is mixed use. And so in this case, it conforms to that vision of the comprehensive plan, and it meets all of the requirements for the conditional use permit, according to staff documentation and analysis here. So that's kind of where the digression of mixtures of ratios and things like that, that's like an architectural review board and neighborhood specific zoning overlays and things like that. That's kind of beyond the purview of what the hearing is about this evening.
I do actually have a question for the applicant.
Okay.
That I meant to ask earlier. So previously, although it is its own site on the alpha, the A side portion of this previous one, questions were brought up in reference to water pressure in the area and things of that nature. And there were some comments led to saying that there were talks with Public Works for improving things. Has this also been taken into account for water pressure in the area? Because again, there have been complaints prior to any of this happening of very low water pressure in that area generally, and adding, more of these units obviously is going to increase demand on water, things of that nature. So water pressure is going to be more and more of an issue. Have you guys worked that out?
Yeah, so Brian, I'll let you fill in if I don't fully explain it well, but my understanding is Brian has been working with Public Works on a solution that, because this was raised in 3A as well, that will properly address the water pressure issue along Taylor Street. Brian, I'm not sure if you have anything else to add to that.
Yeah, that's correct. So Public Works is working with a third-party consultant on an assessment for this region, and that would include the line of Beach Terrace. And those discussions are ongoing and will be a part of our detailed design in the site plan process.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll add to that, although Mr. Murphy is not here today, he's actually out this week. He has been working along with Dewberry, who's already doing work in that area related to our central drainage area. So we are trying to work on all of those projects together simultaneously, so we're not working at the same parts of the ground twice.
And I did want to say on page 4, it talks about how the town is going to actually advance the water system, hydraulic system. So that burden is actually on us.
Is that statement saying that we are compelled to do that if we approve it? What's the nexus in that line in the report?
It just, on page 4, under public utilities, it references that specifically.
I saw that. Is there, or are we somehow, in approving what we're approving, or since that's in these documents, are we?
That's
Do we need balance to
already
do
in our
that?
capital improvement plan and already engineered along with the sewer replacement. We're doing that whether this project happens or not.
As the conditional use permit in front of us stands, do we have any motions or recommendations to council? Would you like to make a motion to adopt as staff is presented? Would we like to make a motion to amend the staff's requests or requirements?
So for myself, I don't know how to make this particular motion. I feel like, although it seems like the majority of the ducks seem to be in a row, with as far as the paperwork is concerned, this application wasn't signed and submitted until after our last planning commission meeting, so it hadn't had a chance to come before the planning commission in a non-public hearing setting. And I think that kind of puts us in a different situation. We're going from 0 to full speed, and not doing the warm-up, if you will. And I'm.
So in this meeting this evening, have we skipped any steps that we would have done if council wasn't present?
I don't know.
Well,
I'm still trying to wrap my head around it.
I hear that, we have a benefit from having the applicant come to us in a setting where we can go back and forth, and then we can have a less formalized process to ask questions. And in this case, like I've heard, is that we went from 0 to full speed here. And it kind of is, it would be better if we could just take more time to review it more carefully. That's all.
Okay, so I've heard that the paperwork is complete, but what other considerations are we unsure about. What would time grant us? Thoughts? You're asking for more time. What is that?
So I for one would like to better understand, and this is the nature of my ongoing awkward questions for eating up so much time. I think that Mr. Mack is completely right, is that the dialogue back and forth about me asking questions about like, why is the staircase going that through the direction? This is sort of weird at a public hearing format, right? Because we've already essentially received the public comment, so there's no follow-up possibility sort of to get like a second dig at this. It was sort of presented cold, and now we have questions that might or might not be of interest to the public. That they might or might not want to either tell us that we're on the right track or that we're completely lost our minds and we should, be just, simplifying this and saying yes, because of the nature of the way this was presented. I'm sort of acting like I'm an expert at something I'm not an expert at because I don't have the benefit of the wisdom of the people that live in the town to try and help us understand, whether my brain is going in the right direction or not. And that in and of itself makes me a little uncomfortable because it's assuming a level of knowledge that I would like to not presume. If I had the benefit of having, after we've had this dialogue, an opportunity to hear from folks.
Yeah, and I would also, have liked to have had the chance to review the design guidelines that we have for this district and, look at that because clearly, it just, as it's presented, doesn't seem like it's really in line with the character of what we were expecting. So the design guidelines are a good way for us to ensure that there's conformity with that.
Am I right that there is some duty that we have though to do something at some point? Is there a clock, like a statutory clock that we are working within?
Yes, for conditional use permits, from your receipt, it's 100 days unless town council reduces that time frame.
Helps to understand. So we've reached an impasse.
Yeah, I think there's just some hesitation there's because of the timing and there's some things that I think that are outside our purview that just don't feel right, that we're like, we want to grab and take hold of it, but we just are powerless. So there's a little bit of like, I'm sitting here like, this doesn't feel right. I don't really like the lack of commercial space. I know, again, that's not our purview. We don't have control over that, but it's just, so I'm not answering your question. I don't know what to put that in motion. At a certain point, I gotta say, we just gotta put our tail between the legs and just throw it up to the council.
Okay, so,
Well, I would like to know from the applicant if maybe we could, have an opportunity to compare the architectural drawing, the design, with what the expectation was as it's been identified in the design guidelines. And if we can address some of the other issues, perhaps the parking issue, which is a huge issue. And is that a possibility?
If I may, Vicki, I think one thing you brought up earlier is about disruption to the boardwalk, construction activity going on. Our goal with submitting this and doing this at this time was so that we could do 3A and 3B in conjunction, have one disruption so that it's not rolling into the next spring and you keep seeing construction activity. That was one goal. Regarding the architectural guidelines, our architect followed those. He read the book. We believe that this adheres to that. We believe it matches what the town is going for there. I believe he explained in our initial presentation. We're happy to answer further questions, but I just wanted to elucidate those 2 points on our side.
Am I correct that we're operating with the two sets of constraints, the things that we actually work on, and then it sounds like there's a development agreement that I don't have access to, that also sort of further narrows the whole, the world that we're living in. If we were allowed more time by our parent body, that sort of controls the timeline, thanks for that clarification. Could we have access to that, or is that proprietary and that's not available?
Development agreement is public.
Is it even relevant to the conversation?
And it is, and has, but it's an added like an overlay district. The development agreement is an additional requirement, but not a consideration of the planning commission.
Correct, and if I may expand upon that just a little bit, so the site, the approval of the site plan, which includes a lot of the items that are being discussed, that is for Mr. Shaw to approve. So that is not something that you have to approve.
Along with
So the site plan could
design
change.
guidelines.
It could change it as the developer works with Mr. Shaw. The site plan is to be approved by the zoning administrator. And architectural considerations, I think there has been, I don't know the whole history in the town, but that would really be, if you really want to go down that path, you would probably need to put into place, or you would need to put into place an architectural review board. You do not have that in place in the town now. So you do have some design guidelines, but that they are just that, just suggestions and guidelines.
So for my own edification and personal clarification, it sounds to me then like there are actually very few things we're actually either approving or denying in this particular sense. And those are, is the application filled out correctly? Did they provide all the documentation that goes along with the application? And is it an issue that needs a cup, which is the commercial residential, which is the yes, and have they met the requirements of that?
That's correct. And if I may put it in these terms, it may be a bit of an oversimplification, but you consider the use and the specifics that are designed around that, again, go to the site plan in large parts, which Mr. Shaw will review.
I was going to say that Mr. Shaw in the past has told us that when we're considering a conditional use permit, we do look at the surrounding community so that there is uniformity in how we apply the conditions in the cup. So I'd like to hear from Mr. Shaw if I repeated that accurately.
I'm not quite sure that you did. The requirements for approval of a conditional use permit are actually identified in Article 16. And here are the three, the basis under which the findings need to be made. And it's on page 4 of the staff report. If you make the determination that one, the use will not affect adversely the health or safety of persons residing or working in the neighborhood of the proposed use, and actually that's the determination to be made by the town council as much as the planning commission, be detrimental to the public welfare, injurious to the property improvements in the neighborhood, and be in conflict with the purposes of the comprehensive plan of the town of Colonial Beach. Those are the three findings that need to be made in consideration. The conditional use permit and the approval of the conditional use permit, as Ms. Giles said, is that you are, the onus is upon the planning commission to make a recommendation to the town council as it relates to adherence to what you believe to be something that meets the three findings that I just read to you. And the other piece of it is, are the conditions that are being asked suffice to address potential adverse impacts upon adjoining properties and the surrounding community? If you answer in the affirmative to that, there should be a circumstance whereby you can make a recommendation to town council. As it relates to the timing of this, I'm taken aback a little bit. This is the same sort of consideration that you made when you made a recommendation in 3A and also in phase 2. So I'm kind of in a quandary here about why this is being raised now as a concern. Well, the circumstance certainly was applicable to the two prior CUPs where the applicant submitted for this type of approval.
Well, so as far as the timing is concerned, this one simply missed a step. Previously, we reviewed the CUP, and then we had in a planning commission meeting, and then we had a public hearing. We scheduled a public hearing for it. This kind of skipped that step. But
this is the third joint public hearing where the same process has been followed.
Agreed, but previously the things we had in the joint public hearing, we had seen prior to that in a non-joint, non-public hearing planning commission meeting. That's the only thing I was saying. So in reference to this, in lieu of all of that, As far as the 3 items on page 4 are concerned, I do believe that this has met those marks. It's providing parking that was not previously there. There is commercial space that's in it that apparently they're going to try to replicate some of what was there previously, being boardwalk style vendors. It is not in conflict with the comprehensive plan, because the comprehensive plan is trying to get mixed use into the resort commercial area. So based on those 3 things, and those 3 things alone, I would move that we, I don't know, the words escape me right now, that we move this to
Accept the staff recommendation.
that we accept the staff recommendations.
Okay.
Second the motion.
We'll take a vote.
Do we have a discussion?
We go to the vote. If you would like to discuss the discussion,
So
please keep your remarks brief.
I think part of the premise of what you're saying is that there's, what John was talking about the adverse impact piece, and this to me does go back to the ratio that's proposed, which is is really, this is a residential building with a tiny bit of commercial, right? And as it's done in that ratio, and they've said this too, so in effect, if you assume that the people who live there are actually gonna have vehicles, they're gonna take up the lot, right? And that anybody who comes for a commercial purpose, even if it's small, is going to be using the street, which is allowed in terms of the ratio. But that could have impacts on other neighbors, which I think in this case is worth discussing because, and this is the part where I was getting about, do we have any data? I think anybody practically going down there on the weekend knows that the existing neighbors don't fit on their property. Really it's, a couple of employees get parked, they just physically don't fit. So there's a heavy reliance on the public space already. And if this proposal came in and was different and had the reverse ratio, say it was 90% commercial with just a little bit of residential, that would provide the flex space that you were alluding to, the fact that this provides. But in the way this is done, it's actually sort of the reverse. There's very little flexible space on the parcel itself. And the flexible piece is the same flexible piece that the neighbors are already using. So this is another part about the order of the meeting, about when we go. I would love after this dialogue to be able to have an opportunity to hear from the neighbors and say, now that we've done this publicly, do you care? And I sort of feel awkward assuming that they do, and I feel awkward assuming that they don't. And like I said, this is the nature of this.
And I get where you're going at
The
with that,
one meeting thing.
But right now, with the commercial use being used on that space, with the vendors taking up space and selling their wares, whether it's food or whatever in that area, currently, there's 0 parking available other than the street. So how many vendors were in that area? 3? Was it 3? Yeah. 3 or 4? 4. So now it would be dropping to 2. So the amount of commercial use in the area that would require street parking would be roughly cut in half, if you're going to go that way with it. And the residential piece would all be in new parking that's currently non-existing under the building. So as far as the parking impact, to me, it looks like there's actually less of a parking impact because there's less commercial space in the area. So I think I get where you're going at.
Yeah.
But I think it's comfortable.
Right. So and it's physically almost adjacent to that Wildfire lot.
I'd like to express a kind of minority opinion as briefly as I can. I do agree that the planning commission hasn't had quite as much time in that, and I'm not happy about that. I really think that the real people that have been disadvantaged here is the public, because they haven't. I think this caught a lot of people off guard exactly how this was going to be done. On the other hand, I think when people talk about commercial, they really mean retail, and basically the only retail you can put in that space is right on the ground floor, right along the boardwalk, and that's what this project is doing. And there are already like 60 residents in the this RC zone. So, yeah, we're making use of that space. It's becoming a better base for taxes, that type of thing. As much as I regret that we had a little bit more time to think about it, especially the public's interest, I'm strongly in favor of moving ahead, and I commend the engineer and Dodson's for the work that they do. It's very good. I do wish that we had a little bit more time on this particular project, but I would be in favor of this motion.
Okay.
And I was just gonna add that, I think that I would have liked to have seen more commercial as well. I think there is an adverse impact on the neighborhood and the surrounding neighborhood with regard to parking. And I don't think it's gonna really be attractive either in terms of how it's gonna look from the boardwalk. But, it does meet the criteria for all the items that are needed for the conditional use permit. So in that case, I have to support it.
So we've got a seconded motion on the floor. Anything? Okay, so let's go ahead and proceed to a roll call vote since we finished our comment period. Mr. Mack?
Aye.
Mr. Christensen?
Aye.
Mr. Knuckles? Nay. Ms. Luna?
Aye.
Aye. Mr. Hill? Aye. Chair votes aye.
Arjun?
Go ahead and make the recommendation that we approve the CUP as with staff recommendation.
On the council side, I'm gonna do request a motion and a second, and then we will open for discussion. Do a motion to move forward the planning commission approval of the COG with the staff recommendations.
So moved.
Have a second? Second. Okay, now it's open for discussion.
So the design for this, I believe, with the resort commercial area, and many of you may remember years ago when we had the boardwalk back in the 70s, 80s, that's all I can remember, sorry. And then we had items like fries and hotels and all that kind of stuff. We had the Dipsy Dogs and all that stuff. We had the commercial areas on the bottom, and then they had hotel or had rental space above it. And getting back to that era of the playground of the Potomac fits that requirement, at least in my eyes. So I think this kind of fits the level set of, one, you have commercial at the ground floor, so you have places to eat on the boardwalk, which, we currently have vendors that fit that bill, and those vendors can fit that. There's also the livability of that. So you think of like Fredericksburg or Winchester or anything, the downtown areas where we're trying to make the downtown area vibrant and usable and stuff like that. So residents being able to walk to restaurants or walk to retail or that type of thing to liven up our downtown district is exactly what we're trying to do within our vision. So I personally think that this is a great asset to the town. The livability, the accessibility, and even having just additional frontage on the boardwalk to get us back to that playground of Potomac area. So.
Anybody understand? Karen.
I would just add to what Mr. Allison said, that it also falls within the guidelines of a Main Street or a viable downtown, and the fact that we're putting people there that will support those businesses that are there within walking distance. So it's not just serving the people that live there by having businesses, but it's serving the businesses by having more people that can shop in those places.
Any other discussion? Oh, sorry. Yes, Ms. Williams.
Yes, I'd like to make a comment, and hopefully it won't get rebudgeted or somebody come back negative on it, but I personally don't like this one bit. I've talked to a lot of residents, they don't like it. And we as council members represent the residents of this town. We sold them a vision of something, grandeur, reopening the boardwalk, making things great. Now we're putting 80% residents and 20%, couple little Cracker Jack boxes in the bottom. I'm sorry, but to me, that just doesn't fit the bill. We have 90% of the town is, the waterfront is residential. And we have a little tiny space. To me, the boardwalk belongs to the people. So the people should really have the most say in what happens to this boardwalk. And I think the vision of the boardwalk is, like Kenny said, bring it back to life. Well, if you put 80% residential, which I've been told in the past, residential is a money loser because it's a huge drain on our infrastructure. So we're going to put a bunch more residents there, and that's going to not really be productive as far as I'm concerned. And so I just have a problem. I'm just not in favor, and that's just my opinion. Thank you.
I have some questions for the applicant.
Sure.
Are the units to be sold or rented?
There'll be rentals.
All of them?
Yes.
Short-term, long-term?
It'll be a mixture. We're not quite sure of the exact mixture, but it'll be a mixture of short-term and long-term.
How many square feet in each rental?
Steve, do you have that on hand? 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms?
We've got 8 1-bedroom and 4 2-bedrooms. Total square footage on the second floor is, second and third floor, the living spaces is 4,607 square feet per floor.
Okay. The condos that are behind you are 4 stories. They are 12% commercial, 12.5% commercial. So actually pretty much in context with other mixed-use development in the area. Just want to point that out. I was going to point out that no action has been taken behind closed doors. All action has been taken in public. Some other comments that were made. The parking requirements in a commercial corridor like a downtown, specifically for something that would be called a resort commercial, should be reliant on grouped parking areas, because if we forced each individual parcel to accommodate all of their parking needs within their individual parcels, it would look like a shopping mall strip that is in Carl D. Silver Parkway instead of downtown. So it is intended on purpose to not have parcels have to accommodate their parking on their own individual lots. We want to encourage walkability and livability downtown. And in order to do that, we want you to park your car. We want you to get out of it, and then we want you to walk. And we want you to walk past other shops and stores and other places, and we want you to go in them and shop at them and visit them while you do that. And so I think that is part of the planning design intent, actually, of the area. And so forcing the parking into municipal lots is a positive. And that is why it's accommodated in this area. The design guidelines, I actually think you hit this one on the mark better than the last one, to be honest with you. You know, I'm a critic of that. I'm sure you expect it at this point.
Good job, Steve.
Did you hear that, Steve? He's offline now.
I did, and I'll make sure to tell my mom you said so.
Oh, wow. It's elevated to that level. That's good. Yeah, it looks like a hip roof on it. Yeah, I appreciate that. And the balconies, the protrusions, the banding, the outdoor and indoor space is part of what a beach town should in fact be like. I went to a building that is designed similar to this, actually, in Duck a couple years ago, and has very tiny retail spaces. 600 square feet is probably about the size. And it was nice because it had a little cookie shop, a little ice cream shop, a little specialty dog store, a little tiny something where it was eclectic and fun and beachy, and it had this river walk right alongside it. And you walked through it, very similar to this building, where the corridor, the ingress egress corridor was in the center. So I don't know that I can totally visualize the building, but that brings to mind the memory that I made with my family at this small commercial mixed-use place. And one of the few places that during COVID had tenants that were active and open, which I thought was surprising too. So I appreciate the timeline we have for the development agreement as well. And at that, I will take a vote. If there's some more discussion. Okay, I'll start on this side. Ms. Clement?
Vote aye.
Okay, Mr. Moncura?
No.
Ms. Robertson?
Aye.
Dr. Sullivan?
Aye.
Mr. Williams?
Nay.
Mr. Allison?
Aye.
Aye. You have that anyway, though. Okay. Moving forward.
Thank you.
All right, next up on the agenda for the joint meeting is a public hearing on the zoning text amendment, the zoning ordinance Article 29, Plan Unit Development Residential HUD R District. We are going to hold a public hearing. I'm not expecting action though today. So, you want to read us in generally to it, and then we'll hold the public hearing. It's not a requirement to take action at it, and I think there's more, there's been a request for more time on some of the items. So we're going to take the public hearing because we have advertised it, and people plan around public hearings and make sure that they can attend them and their lives, but
Madam Mayor, it does say on the agenda for today that public input will be done by the planning commission first.
public input is joint, it's a joint hearing,
Yeah,
and
yes,
then your
planning
action will
commission
be first.
Yes.
Correct. I was setting the stage for expectations.
Good, thank you.
Okay. All right. Staff?
Yes, at the request of the town council, having looked at the current Article 29 of your zoning ordinance, which is at your seats at town council as well as planning commission, your current article, a copy of your current Article 29 for planned unit development residential district. So at the request of town council, this matter was brought to planning commission and a consultant hired to review the current PUD ordinance, for short, the planned unit development residential district, which I will refer to as the PUD ordinance. So that was brought to, at town council request to the planning commission. A consultant was hired, the Berkeley Group. They worked with planning commission in April and in May. They drafted a recommended proposed draft ordinance, walked through that with planning commission. And based on that and some other questions, or a couple of times, based on comments and questions, staff made edits to that, which we hope captured everyone's edits. There may be others. But the edited version, based on the review with planning commission and in consultation with the Berkeley groups, that is the draft that was in your packets for this evening and for your consideration. Again, if this is not, just to clarify, because I think that was one point of confusion, it is not a new ordinance, it is a rewrite of an existing ordinance. So you already do have a PUD or ordinance in Article 29.
Okay. With that, I'm going to open up the public hearing. Is this the right?
Madam Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we not conduct the public hearing at this time. The planning commission has, in my opinion, needs more time to discuss this. As our attorney on staff has said, that We discussed this very briefly for an hour in our May meeting and for about an hour and a half in our in our April meeting. And then
You can't make a motion for council. Thank you.
I'm just asking that we don't hold the public hearing.
We've advertised it to the public that showed up. I mean, that's kind of. They're here.
Oh, so we're not having a public hearing now, is that it? We're having public input. Is that right? This is not a formal public hearing? Correct?
Vivian, would you like to, this is the hearing,
Yes.
yeah, where public input is taken, but action can be deferred.
Correct.
Well, I'm concerned about us holding a public hearing on this because it may require us statutorily in Virginia to not, for the planning commission to not have another opportunity for a public hearing. And we would.
I'm gonna go refer to the lawyer.
You can
if
have
I
as
could
many
just-
public hearings on the matter as you would like.
Pardon?
You can have as many public hearings on a matter as you would like.
Okay. Well.
So we can hold this one and you can hold another one. People are here.
Yes, and you know, we have an opportunity to hear from everyone here. in
I'm not going to stop
during
people
our
from talking
public
when they've been
input.
advertised to
We
be able to
have-
have input.
We have that on item 4 of our agenda, where people can speak on the matter.
So the way this is gonna move forward, and then you can defer and we can adjourn and recess and you guys continue this discussion, but a planning commissioner cannot make a motion of council. Period. And we also have a legal obligation.
I'm sorry, it says joint public hearing, so.
We have a
Okay.
legal obligation to allow citizens to speak when it's been advertised for them to have the time and space to do so.
Oh, we have the opportunity to do that on item 4 of the agenda. But proceed.
I'm opening the public hearing at 7:03 PM, but I'm not sure I have the correct sign-up sheet.
There's nobody signed up for the PUD amendment and reenactment of Article 29.
Okay, so Joyce, were you here for the third one?
Signing up for.
This one?
It was confused. Yes.
Yeah, there's one for the potential text amendment to conditional use in the resort commercial area. And then there's one for the amendment and reenactment of Article 29 PUD. And then that one was the one for the conditional use permit.
Talked about second, I believe. That's the one related to the plan unit.
Yes. Is that the one you want to speak on?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so come on up. Yep.
Good evening, folks. My name is Joyce Reimer, and I own a property at 204 Bancroft Avenue. I also want to make it clear tonight that I'm expressing my own opinions, and they do not represent any community organization. Development has been a contentious issue in communities across the country for good reason. Residents want to have, and they should have, an influence over the development that occurs where they live. Now, I'm pleased to hear that there is a deferral on this zoning change, that it's not being voted on tonight. As I say, understand that this zoning change is the purpose of paving the way for large-scale development on the outskirts of town. A pretty significant amount of development. That would include a range of housing prices, options, and price points. What concerns me is that the community has received little information about how these zoning changes could affect future development, nor are any provisions about how and whether residents will be able to influence outcomes to accord with community needs and preferences. That is not, I don't think any of us know how that will occur. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong there, but I feel we should be able, the public, should be able to review projections as to how this development will impact on infrastructure, stormwater, wastewater, and drinking water capacity, effect on our school system, and whether designs will complement and reinforce the historic small town character of the community or not. I also became acutely aware this evening of how important ratios are, whether it's the ratio of residential housing to commercial use in a mixed use environment, residential commercial environment, or in something like planned unit development, where there are questions of the ratio of single family homes, multi-unit housing options, rental properties, the ratio that will be used for workforce housing as opposed to market price housing. So I was glad that you brought that up tonight. It's an important issue. Thank you. The town government has been working with the Department of Agriculture's Rural Community Development Initiative. I would like to hear. Okay.
Will you submit your comments in writing to Heather? Obviously, the.
I'm very sorry the public can't hear them all.
Okay.
Can I just have a clarifying question along those lines? So when we ask for what you just asked for, which is wonderful, by the way, how does the public see that?
It could be included is it in the minutes if they include it in writing? Like when you have Bob Vaughn's email, do you include the whole thing?
Yes, so when it's in writing, I include it in its entirety. So if somebody comes up and does public comment, if the mayor or any council member instructs them to submit it to me in writing, then I will include it in the minutes, the whole entire thing.
Thanks.
Is there anyone else for this here?
I just have the email from Joe.
And an email from Mr. Gow. Yep.
Right. Mr. Kelly writes, I understand that the current PUD, planned unit development zoning regulations, are 20 years old and agree they should be updated. In an effort to be transparent to the community, it should be noted that there is one parcel in the town that qualifies for the PUD regulation. That parcel is about 500 acres owned by the Lennar Group, one of the largest home builders in America. It's important for all citizens to understand the financial and economic impact of a development of this size to the current residents. For example, some information that should be studied before changing the PUD zoning regulations include this site can provide 1,400 to 1,500 new housing units, which could generate an increase in students for public schools, with more than 900 students, which will require a new school. How will this be funded? Next one. With more and more people working from home, it's likely that families with children will buy these homes as distinct from the current pattern of purchases by retirees and weekenders. What is the capacity of the current water and sewer systems to handle this level of growth? What's the potential cost of expanding this increased demand? On who's paying for new costs to expand the base system? A traffic study to understand the potential economic impact and potential congestion. With a development of this size, a traffic study would be very informative and lead to recommended improvements. Again, who's paying for the needed road improvements? Should there be a traffic impact fee assessment or maybe a school impact fee assessment? Should there be a new school or service retail or even offices recommended in this area, even if not part of the PUD? I know that the details of any development will be negotiated in the development agreement with the town. Having a well thought out plan for the orderly expansion of town will put us in a better position to negotiate for the best deal for all. There are a number of other details that come to mind. The above items are significant enough to put the brakes on changing the regulations tonight, so that there is time to do studies needed to make smart changes to the current regulations. And that is it.
Okay, anybody else?
I just wanted to, I don't know that everybody in here realizes, that Lennar bought that property 20 years ago. And they literally just sat on it. And I guess that this is the time that they think is the right time to do the development. So it's been in the works, but it wasn't talked about for obviously a year. Wasn't sure if everybody knew that or not.
All right, I'm gonna close the public hearing at 7:11 then. I like that, 7:11. Can we get Slurpees?
You have to wait 12 days.
Huh?
You have to wait 12 days.
Yeah. 7-Eleven.
Just
Oh,
around.
I know. Can we get 3 Slurpees that day? My kids always make me go on that day. Okay. I shouldn't even say my kids, Tommy makes me go. Education.
As Ms. Luna alluded to earlier, we're going to be looking for a motion to defer action on this, since that's what it explicitly states on the agenda here this evening. We would like to have a little bit more robust referral, specifically to look at having a work session / town hall style meeting on this particular subject on or about July 12th, 13th, or 14th, so as we can schedule space and availability. I would defer on the exact date, but that is the timeframe we're looking at. So I need to see if I can get a motion from the planning commission to defer action for this evening.
I would like to move to defer action on this.
Second.
Sounds like a quick one this time.
All right, quick on the draw. So, that being the case, is there any further discussion about deferral of action this evening?
I would simply like to make a couple very small comments very quickly in reference to some of the things that were put forward. So we are not creating a new ordinance. This ordinance already exists. We're simply updating and doing things of that nature in it. And within that, there, just to point out for people in the audience that are concerned, on page 5 of this, under section 29-7 in the revised version, are requirements as to the types of dwellings, single family, duplex, or single family attached, and multifamily, and how many are allowed, as well as maximum density, etc. And also in section 29-4, as far as requirements of the applicant, some of the things that are included as requirements are a traffic study, a physical impact analysis, assessment of environmental impact, and there is also the ever wonderful additional studies may be required section, which means basically, to me, it means we can have them study whatever it is that we have concern over. So we have the ammunition within this, or the town has the ammunition within this to have those things ferreted out by anyone who wishes to have development. So that was my only further comment on that.
I just have briefly a comment that, it has sat there for 20 years and owned by Lennar and being undeveloped. But what's changed now is that we are looking at the fact that developers are not wanting to build golf course communities. And they also are looking for greater density, which provides them a lot more revenue for their projects. So those are two key factors that have changed, and as a result, it makes this particular piece of property very attractive to, in terms of what the text amendment is, how it's directing us.
Quick question on the document itself. So there's the red line and the blue. Is the blue the recommendations that we changed? It seems like we had other changes as well.
I think it's different revisions by different bodies.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So these are all of the revisions as a rolling document, but we've had different bodies make revisions. Is that correct?
That is correct, and we think this captures everyone's. If it does not, that it's certainly a work in progress, but we think this is the edits that were shared with staff to date.
And this is currently available on the town website, correct?
Yes.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, so that everybody can access this and take a look at this themselves. So, any other further comments on this? Okay.
So, one on the deferral process and saying that we have the document listed. One of the reasons why I believe, well, it's my opinion, I believe I have support from other members as well as to why we're looking to defer this is we as a body have not come to the point to where it's saying even the working draft is something we agree to and we're looking for other comments. We're a little behind, I guess, on our homework, right? In terms of if we were thinking that this is the thing that even we have come to agreement on. There is some agreement with some pieces, and we had a number of questions, some of which are still outstanding, and probably we will come to more of them on our own, but we are also looking for, I agree with the idea of having a broader call for input. And just a moment to clarify what we were talking about, because certainly as somebody who did, comes from a world other than the development, what in the world we're talking about? We're talking about a different set of rules for large chunks of land that would be different than what you would do for, what it would otherwise be. Because you don't have to actually trigger one of these to actually develop in town, right? So this is a sort of a special category for what if you want to do something different than what's already allowed. But the trigger for that is you have to do a big chunk. So that's sort of you get sort of a flavor of what we're talking about, because I don't know that necessarily comes through in the obscure language of the stuff we normally talk about. I think if we can come up, preceding the next meeting that we have, some things that at least simplify the call for input beyond what we already have, because I think these documents as they're produced for us in town council, and maybe we need something that sort of is in parallel for this, that explains maybe the PUD process a little bit more. Maybe we'd have a little more engagement and interest, I think, if we could use language rather than the language we typically use.
It is my intent to add that to the planning commission portion of this evening meeting, not necessarily take up the council's time on that, but yes.
Yeah, and with that, I'm supportive and would like to do a vote.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I could,
Yes.
if I could add just one bit, and just to clarify something that was shared earlier, and as Planning Commission considers this draft ordinance further, there's a lot of talk about a couple of things. The development. Well, there is no development. There's no application. This is simply an ordinance amendment. There is no application before the town, and there is no development that anyone is speaking of.
Thank you for that.
There's been some other, there's also been comment about it's a single piece of property, but that property is comprised of at least 14 lots, and it's over 400 acres. So the reason I bring that up is because even if it's all under common ownership, and that's the bulk of it is probably under common ownership. We looked at that. But assuming even if all of it is under common ownership today, it does not have to remain under common ownership. So you could be looking at one PUD development. You could be looking at 10 PUD developments. As you consider the ordinance, I would encourage you to not think about a specific development because there is no development. There's nothing before the town at present. This is at what you develop. I encourage you to think in terms of generally what a development would look like.
I have a question for Ms. C. Giles. I'm glad to hear that, we're not at the applicant stage yet because we're not ready for that, but
they could submit an application tomorrow and it would be under the old one, which
but my question is, has there been meetings with a developer on this piece of property?
I'm not at liberty to say.
So, okay, thank you.
If I may, for just 1 second, I know there's been a lot of conversations around timeline and involvement and transparency. So I just wanted to lay out a timeline since town council is here today about how we arrived at this process. On March 2nd, Councilmember Allison, who is the Planning Commission liaison, under item F, instructed a review of this article. From March, after that meeting, town engaged with the consultant, which Mr. Shaw, works with the Berkeley Group on a revision of the article. In April, the draft was provided to the Planning Commission for review. At their meeting on April 26th, they provided feedback on the draft and recommendations to the consultant. Between April and May, they completed their full revisions of all of the feedback from the Planning Commission and provided that back to the Planning Commission for the meeting on May 26th. That revised draft provided to the Planning Commission in discussion commenced at that meeting, and recommendations and additions were then incorporated into the draft that you have before you. Today, we are looking at that draft with all revisions provided by the Planning Commission today. As it relates to some specific follow-up that the Planning Commission requested that has been provided were specific examples from the cities of Virginia Beach, Suffolk, Falls Church regarding affordable dwelling unit ordinance, and that was provided to them as well as town staff. There were also specific sections related in this ordinance as drafted, section 24.9, which reads, an assessment identifying any areas within the proposed development that have scenic assets, cultural or archaeological resources or other natural features deserving of protection or preservation, and that continues. That language has been included in the revisions, as well as section 29-7 under maximum residential density. I will also say that some of those conversations were upwards of 2 hours long. So not to belabor the point, but I don't want people to necessarily believe that these were short conversations, because this has been going on for a couple of months. We'll be happy to come back and discuss this at length. However, that consultant is done with this process at this point, so this will be handled in-house by staff. So if any specific recommendations as it relates to any additional revisions can be given tonight, staff can begin that work for whatever workshop will be had in the next couple of weeks. So thank you.
And I just want to say that, if the reference or the referral came in March, I don't think any of us on the commission was aware of that. Our first discussion was in April. And so I think that should be the referral date is when we're, informed, and not March. Because we might need that extra time. And I know we've got a window of about, 100 days. And today we're at day 64. So we've got a lot of work to do in the next, 40 days or so.
Actually, the referral window on an ordinance amendment is 60 days. You're already over.
So we're already behind, guys.
I also want to
We got our work, and there's a lot of it to do.
This mic is not working, but I also want to clarify some comments that have been related to experts in this field. That is why we engage with the Berkeley Group. While we do have very qualified staff on staff, including Mr. Shaw, myself, Ms. St. Giles, and Ms. Epco, who all have the previous economic development experience as well as planning experience, we did go outside of our current staffing to do this. So the specifics that you have before you have been drafted by subject matter experts. So as we further delve into that, I just want to also make note for the record that those who currently are proceeding to revise this are not the subject matter experts that we hired to look at it. So we should also understand that as we go forward with revisions. Thank you.
Seems to conclude discussion. Do we need a roll call vote, or can we just do we need a roll call vote? Mr. Mack?
Can I just ask a clarification? Can you reread the motion? There's been a discussion.
We're making a motion to defer action on this because it explicitly says planning commission action. We're making a motion to defer action and advance that deferral to the council.
Thanks. Sorry, continue.
Aye. Mr. Christian?
Aye.
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 Aye. Chair votes aye. Planning Commission recommends to defer action on this matter.
Okay. Same format as last time, I'd like a motion to approve a deferral as recommended by the Planning Commission and continue to defer action on this for future meetings. There's a motion to that effect.
So moved.
And a second, and then we'll open it for just.
Second.
Okay, now it's open for discussion. Yeah.
I really want to commend staff and the planning commission and the advisors that you have engaged. As I look at the current PUD and the lack of infrastructure in it and the lack of requirements that we can ask of a developer that came in with an application, I feel like that time is a little bit of the essence. And so, I mean, an application could come in tomorrow and we would have to act on it under the existing PUD, which doesn't allow us to require all of these studies that have been added to the new PUD. I'm not a subject matter expert, but I have gone through it line by line. I've had discussions with subject matter experts, and I personally would have preferred to move this forward, but that's not what we're going to do today. So I would ask that we put some sort of a timeline on this where it comes back for action as soon as possible.
Are you amending the motion or are we still in discussion?
We're still in discussion.
Okay. Mr. Ellison?
Yep, so attending those nice long meetings that we had, I think the Berkeley group did a great job, as Ms. India said, that, that they are the experts in this field. They have provided information from other areas that kind of have the same type of ordinances, and they really provided a great document for us to work off of. And I think, personally, I think we could have worked with what we had, but I'm certainly willing to not sit through the 2-3 hour meetings again, but I'm willing to sit through those and making sure we get it, right for the town and right for the residents. Thank you.
Who are you? Okay. And as part of, do you have any, Dave? I just want to echo what I think Planning Commissioner Mack said about the difference between the current and the new. I mean, it's also been highlighted by other commissioners. If we have an application under our current ordinance, as others have said, a traffic study is not required. A physical impact analysis is not required. Architectural elevations are not required. Voluntary proffers are not required. Currently, our ordinance does not require these things. Currently, our ordinance does not require an assessment of the environmental impact. And currently, our ordinance does not even imply that we should be requesting additional studies. Currently, our ordinance allows for 8 units per acre at 500 acres. It is 4,000 units by right in their PUD. Currently, the ordinance says that a percentage of that has to be open space. That total percentage of 500 acres is 42, which is not a lot of space in that. It also states that our commercial use must not exceed a certain percentage per unit. And if they were to build all of the units, that would be 100,000 square feet of commercial space, not to exceed that. They could have none, but nothing bigger than that. So I just want to reiterate how lacking the 20-year-old ordinance that we currently have is, how detrimental this particular ordinance would be to this community if we do not revise it before an application comes in order to be better prepared for that. And that the current 20-year ordinance was indeed written prior to Lennar applying for a PUD. So this was written in order for them to be able to do any of these things. And it was, I mean, for the amount of acres they have, up to 4,000 units, I think that would be a little overwhelming. So I think the work that the Berkeley group has done to this point has been phenomenal. The fact that it's aligned with our comprehensive plan's goals is awesome. The fact that it talks about mixed types of housing is wonderful. There's a lot of really good things in this. So looking forward to taking action on this in order to protect the town, because currently the town is not protected under the current PUD. And that's very concerning to me. Is there more discussion on the deferment?
I wanted to ask a question of Mr. Of the chair, Nathan. You, in your original motion, mentioned some dates and that weren't included in your final motion. Can you just tell me a little bit more about what you were thinking on those dates and what would happen?
The intent would be to have additional public input and an opportunity to go ahead and sort through all of those details that we want to make sure that we include to protect the town, and have something that we can present to the council for their next regular session, since there is no council work session this month. So that is the intent of that.
So that you would have a recommendation for us by the 20th of July?
That is the intent.
Okay.
Yes.
And as I'm going through this, I'm just curious as to how you're going to gather additional public input.
So we're going to schedule a work session, and we're trying to we'll coordinate with venue and timing with the town resources at this point. So it's going to be an open dialogue. It could potentially turn into a town hall type of situation depending on the public.
But you're not going to call another public hearing?
Correct.
Okay. So, and then at that point, is there?
I wasn't aware that we weren't going to call another public hearing on this matter.
Okay. So we're doing a work session / town hall type meeting to solicit additional input.
Upon which, at that point, I understood that we would follow the process as we always have for a text amendment to the zoning, then a public hearing and then a vote.
So tonight's public hearing, correct me if I'm wrong,
But that was the question that I asked Mr. Steve Giles, is that we can have another public hearing, and I think that's important. Because, you know.
So we are going to give prior notice. We're going to advertise the venue and the time and make sure that that gets out in a timely manner within the next couple of days. And so I'm not sure what the fine distinction of you're looking for. What is it you're looking for additionally beyond the additional public input?
Well, you know, as I go through, you know, community groups and meet with them, people are just not aware of this. And I think that when we are, you know, called for a town hall meeting and we discuss this, I think there's going to be more interest. And it's at that point that I think we'll get more testimony from our residents and at a public hearing.
I think there's some confusion about allowing public input and then the official notification requirements of a public hearing. Is that?
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to figure out.
That's all right. I don't think anybody's not willing to listen to more public input. Is that?
Right.
What
That's the whole intent of this exercise, is to garner additional input. So that's why I'm confused about what it is that you're seeking.
Public hearing,
You're looking for comment on the comment.
On the record. And, you know, when we do a town hall, just as we did for Eleanor Park, we did less than a page paragraph on that. And, you know, there wasn't a lot of opportunity to get the word out into the community. So, but a public hearing does require notification, and it really gives us the opportunity to hear more from residents. And again, people are just not aware that this is happening. So it gives us more time.
So I have another question for the planning commission. And going through this line by line, it seems to me that everything that we've discussed in individual meetings has been addressed in here. And I'm just curious of what additional things you expect you might want to add that don't appear in here now.
We're just, I think the intent from the discussions I've had with the other commissioners is that we want to pause, make sure and verify that we have hit all of those points. That is the intent at this point, as well as garner additional public input specifically for the text amendments at whatever level of participation that the public so chooses to.
And so one of my concerns is that I've heard members of the public say that we need to require this, that, and the other that are not legally allowed to be required. And that's my concern of the public making those recommendations and then the attorney having already advised us on some things that can and cannot. So I'm.
Right, so the difference between topical and technical is what you're talking about, I guess. Is that a good way to bifurcate that concept there? So,
well, you know, comments have been made we shouldn't allow a developer to come in here without requiring certain proffers, and we can't require proffers.
Correct.
That's illegal in Virginia.
Yes.
That law has been rolled back, and it's no longer, and so I'm just concerned of the additional public input that you're seeking other than what you've already gotten,
Well,
and how you will address that.
I think that clearly if the public says, I think they should require that everybody already in town gets a puppy, you know, we wouldn't consider that. People are allowed to say and recommend absolutely anything they want to. That's why we have public input. And it's our job to classify that input as relevant and something to include or consider, or as something that we cannot legally consider, or that is not a justifiable consideration. So the fact that somebody may say, well, I think we should require that they require proffers, and we know we can't do that. So we would say, thank you very much for your input, and we would continue to move on.
But if you don't address why you can't do that, I guess is my concern, because a lot of times there's a lot of public input that we don't respond to.
Well, yeah, we would certainly say we can't do that.
So one of the things that will be prefaced to this meeting, and part of that communication that we have to clarify what exactly we're trying to do here, it was pointed out earlier that there has not been an application. This is a text amendment. So we're going to clearly outline scope, kind of like the conversation that we got into in the last exercise about what are the conditions that we're looking at specifically, narrow that scope, and to the point where it is very definable, and we can include and exclude comments that are within and without that scope. So that's part of the making sure that we are also, as the planning commission, staying in our lane.
And so is it reasonable to expect that you will have a recommendation to move forward with the revised PUD to the council by our work session, by our regular meeting on the 20th?
yes.
Yes.
Okay.
And I just wanted to add that, you know, it is a holiday weekend, and, you know, so a lot of folks are out of town or what have you. And by doing this and holding a town meeting, I think we'll hear from a lot more people, and we can talk about what our constraints are.
That's, yeah.
So I would like to modify my motion to include that we defer it until the meeting on the 20th, and that we expect to have a revision back to us to be able to take action on at that time.
Okay, so I have a motion to amend the motion. Second, all right, is there any more discussion on that motion? We'll piggyback it if everybody's in agreement, if you're in agreement, so, yeah. Mr. Lee?
Question, I guess this would be kind of for the planning commission. I'm not gonna try to admit that I know a lot about this planned urban development or the impacts. So I'm probably with a lot of the other citizens that are out there. So do you, as a planning commission, have a recommendation for myself and other citizens that we could start researching and looking into, I mean, the big impacts? Like, you give us some bullet points of things that we should be the most concerned about with not having a current PUD in place.
Well, I've done some research on that particular thing, and Jamestown is another coastal town that has a PUD text amendment, and it's very similar to ours. So if you get a chance to go onto their website and look at their ordinance, that might be a help to you.
And I think a clarification is the PUD is a tool to cover and ensure that we have the legal standing to ask for the protections that we need for our citizens. So as Mr. Max pointed out earlier, probably the most important section is 29-4, with the application requirements. And that is the section that gives us the authority to ask for, what does this mean to our town from any potential applicant? And that is very, very important. This is the tool that gives us the legal standing to require an applicant to tell us explicitly what this is going to do to our town, good, bad, or indifferent. And so with the list that we have included here, we have also added the additional studies as may be required. So if we find something that is not explicitly stated in here, we can add to that if we deem that necessary for clarification of the impacts and how the development will affect our town. So the importance of this text amendment is that it is the tool for us to protect ourselves from a developer that could potentially come in and adversely impact our community.
In order to help with that, I have one quick question. Are both of these versions available to the public online? The current PUD version and the intended revision?
Yes.
Okay, so my suggestion would be take the old version, which looks like an old version, and it's really thin, and take the new version, right, that looks like a nice, new, very well done version. It's got Berkeley group all over it, and I would compare the two. And that's where I think, that's where I get some of my best education out of it, because I don't know anything about this. I was an aviation mechanic for 20 years, I'm a developer. So for me, my best education on where we're going to from where we were is the comparison of those two documents. I think that's the best educator for all of us.
And you know, in relation to your question, I wanted to say that what we've seen typically is that we'll have a master plan that will cover all of the district itself, not just individual PUDs within the PUD district, so that we can have a planning process whereby the land that would be most amenable to a park, for example, would be identified in the master plan. We might include infrastructure like a water tower or outflow, stations and that sort of thing, maybe even roads to that degree. But that's something that could be part of the additional studies that Nathan had talked about that we might explore at our work session.
Mr. Williams, I want to get real for just a little bit of a moment about you're asking about what the important sections are, right? And in generic level, Nathan's right? Really, that's the section that's got most of the meat. But another thing I want to be really clear about is how far we really got into this. We were working our way through this. It got late. We just got tired and went home because we didn't really know that, like, just around the corner, we were going to be, somebody was going to say, like, is your homework done? We'd like to vote on it. We just missed that, right? I don't know. Communication problem somewhere along the line, we didn't get it. So we're not quite there yet because we, on our own, sort of raised a couple items at the very last minute, and it was clear to us that was going to be like a long talk. And we just, what was it, like 10 o'clock or something, right? It was really late. So just to sort of put that in expectation, so there is this document, you can begin to look at that, but just keep an eye out for this next piece that we're gonna have. And there may be things that aren't in this at all, or there may be slight revisions. We can't really predict that yet. And the other part that goes along with that, this is why we wanted to have a dialogue with folks, is in the format of our regular meetings, where the only way we'd be able to get input on this would be somebody to say, as a part of the generic comments at the beginning of the meeting. So the assumption that we've gotten input from the public, we haven't really heard hardly anything, right? Because we haven't really teed it up to ask them that because we didn't feel comfortable enough with our own document to get to that point. So everything that's been said is true and also maybe a little more rose-colored glasses than really is accurate about where we are, but I think we can get there quickly.
So point of order, can we vote or just, if there's any, unless there's any further discussion on the amended motion to put a request that this come back to us by the 20th, do we need to vote on the amendment or can we
No,
just
if
do
you
a
agree
friendly?
to the piggyback, I think we're voting on the amended motion. Is that right?
I would withdraw the motion to amend and just make a friendly amendment and have your second person agree to the friendly amendment and then just vote on that.
That's what I thought we did.
So that's what I intended to do, but the same person didn't second it.
Oh.
It was
I
a
think
different
Tom,
person.
you need to
Tom
second.
seconded it. So Kenny would need to agree to the amended motion, I think.
Agreed.
Okay. friendly amendment, we're voting on one motion. Yes.
Can I also just add, to answer Mr. Williams' question, I would advise to take a look at our comp plan that was adopted, because what the Berkeley Group did in the very early phases of this was look at the comp plan and see where there were potential conflicts and work on the revisions. In line with that, also with other localities in the state. So I would also urge, as we go and start looking at localities outside of our state, that there may be some things that are applicable legally that would not be applicable here in Virginia. So if you look at it with that lens, as well as all the work that Berkeley Group has done in alignment with our locality specifically and our specific needs, that's what you have before you. So as we start looking at amending too much or revising too much, that you could run afoul of all the work that they've done based on the work that they've done in our community. So I just want to make sure that's noted.
Okay, all right, we're gonna vote on this. Yes, I got a kid in childcare right now. Sorry. I'm gonna start this way. Mr. Williams.
Aye.
Yes,
Aye.
Mr. Yes. Aye. Yes.
Aye.
And I, and then I am gonna motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
So moved.
Second. All in there?
Aye.
Excellent. Planning Commission.
Planning Commission is going to call a 5-minute recess and then we'll reconvene.
I love you every day.
Hey, plug in. Hi there. Good then. Shit. Darn.
13th of Monday?
It's
Should be
Wednesday.
Wednesday.
No, I'm in June, my bad.
I was like,
So 13th of Wednesday?
yeah.
And are you recording this, or will you be,
5:30?
and then posting it on the town's website?
Still on.
Yeah.
Oh, it's still on.
It's on YouTube. Right.
Okay. I didn't say anything about it.
That's what I signed up for, yeah. You're the George from.
Or whatever they say.
Yeah, no, that one seems to be.
No, it's like, it's the post office.
No, I'm not saying to change it, I'm just saying that's in the account.
So 13th, yeah.
Oh, it's that day.
Like in the evening. Or, that's like.
Yeah.
There's like a post office.
Are you saying 13th, Beth?
Thursday, what?
Did you say the 13th?
The 13th is bad.
Okay, it's bad for me as well.
Okay.
Okay, I'm saying, we're not in town, not, it's not back.
Yes.
What?
So you're gone on Tuesday?
I'm going from 6
Oh, you're out.
out, yeah, but then I'm back up. Like just place that. There is no other instruction.
So the 13th is right now.
Okay. I mean, it's not, all right, so not the 13th. What are the alternates for that then?
And we have to be mindful of advertising.
That's what we're trying to do.
Because Monday's a holiday, so tomorrow.
You need 3 days.
You need 3 days.
Just 3 days.
Yeah, it's not 2 weeks. It's 3 days, so that's not, it's just trying to make sure that we get it.
I hate doing it on a Friday, but
People in town.
Was there a problem, there was a problem on Thursday?
You're also-
Yeah, I'm gonna be.
You're also requesting emails instead of people being here. If you're looking for public input, you can provide emails.
Correct.
Yeah, we've got.
is,
We're just trying to get a video done at the same time as possible.
is doing it the 18th too close to the 20th? It's not?
That's fine.
And could this be in lieu of our July meeting? We've done that when we did the town hall for Eleanor Park. We did that.
I think, and it's really close to it if we do the 18th.
Yeah.
18th.
Yeah,
We
I wrote the 18th.
If the town hall, we're gonna meet after the town hall. Make sure that we are send the town.
I think it's, we're calling it a, are we gonna call it a meeting or are we gonna call it a?
I don't know.
Work session. The reason why we want to call it a work session is because we want to be able to get enough free input from people. But it's still kind of a meeting, so we can still make some kind of recommendation.
The only reason why I call it town hall is we need to have at least enough structure to have sign ups and time.
And, yeah, so if you
But
call
a
it a
work
work
session,
session,
we
that's
can do the
fine.
same thing.
You also need to have
It is the same.
consensus before the 20th. Agree upon the.
Yeah.
So the 18th would cover that for us, and that's not too close to it, you're saying? So-
No, because town council, and Mr. Allison, correct me if you think you disagree, but the town council already has the draft, and they've had it for several weeks. So it's not like it's something they haven't seen.
So they're just gonna get the edits of the.
They also seen tonight.
If we even have it.
So,
Yeah.
for the public hearing.
Yes.
So I would say, so 18, is that good for you?
So we need to do the process for this. We get some, talk to the people, hopefully agree amongst ourselves. We have something on, and then they have a public hearing.
So you would have, from now until the 18th to review your current stuff. Then you would receive public input on your work session. If nothing is added to, so basically you have now until the 18th to do all your homework.
Yeah.
And validate that what you want to give is the final draft.
You then, at your work session, give that draft to the public to say, here's what we're working off of. And if there's no added input or no changes, we bless it, and then on the 20th, we have the town council meeting, which we would do our part of it, bless it, make it the,
I have a question. At one point during a work session, we were told way back that we couldn't take a vote on items in a work session. Is that true?
No, that's not correct.
Okay,
A lot
good,
of
good.
councils
We
and
can
boards
wrap
think
it
that,
up.
but that's not.
Tie it up in a bow.
And just to clarify, Mr. Knuckles, town council will not, unless I'm instructed otherwise, hold another public hearing because they checked that legal box tonight. But they can take as much public input as they want, same result.
I thought that the distinction between you would have to have another public hearing, whereas if between the version that the first hearing happened on, if they're, every which way it went, it's either if it allows more, or if it restricts more, in the draft, that would in and of itself trigger the public hearing because the public has been asked to comment on. So I don't know which way it's go. Do you know what it is? Is it
Yes,
getting more
it's less,
restrictive or
and
less restrictive?
there's no hard and fast rule, but it really is not tied to which way it goes, being more restrictive or less restrictive. It's tied to, are the changes so significant so as to change the substance of what the public had the chance to review? If that's, like, for example, if another whole section were added, that's something that the public previously did not have. If you change some verbiage or change, things here, there within the confines of what has been reviewed, and it's not, it doesn't really, and again, there's no hard and fast, that you can point to, but as long as it's with, I tend to look at it in terms of scope. I feel like I could reasonably defend that in court if I had to.
I thought that there was specific language in the state, though, that talks about change, and that the trigger for how you evaluate change was highest and best use.
If that were a developer or an applicant, as I read that statute.
And that,
So it's a text
talking about being more,
as a result of a request. Correct.
and being more restrictive, oftentimes the consensus, and I don't wholesale agree with this, but generally people will say you can go more restrictive than what the state enables, but not less restrictive than what the state enables. That is the general consensus on that. Again, I don't agree with that in whole, but that is typically.
A complete rewrite of your current thing that was provided by the first, whatever additions that y'all have already provided to staff and stuff. So I think we're really clear on the not requiring another hearing. I think what you just want to have is, like you said before, you want to do your homework, you want to review it, see if you need to cross a T or dot an I or somewhere, and then get public input at your work session to validate if there's any additional things that may have been overlooked, or somebody wants something new, and we'll determine if it's legal or not, and that kind of stuff, and push forward.
So as we're being conversational about this with trying to talk to the public about coming, this is their only opportunity then. Do I understand the flow then?
Well, they had an opportunity tonight.
Correct. I'm saying the only opportunity going forward will be our forum for them to.
Well, they would also be able to have public comment at the town council meeting as well. Because the town council would then have to make the votes to approve or disapprove.
Yep.
So they'll still have public comment during that session too.
The generic public comment was there, or like what we did tonight? where it's like
Generic.
Okay.
So which will be listed on the agenda as, prior to.
Okay, so we're ready to rock and roll?
Yes.
6 PM on the 18th, 6 PM.
Oh, in the past we did earlier, do we want to keep?
I would like for in the spirit of public participation.
Yeah, 6 is fine.
keep it by 6 PM.
And for all those members that are working.
Exactly. All right, so I'd like to call to order, adjourn recess for the regular planning commission, not joint session, for Thursday, June 30th. Do we have any changes or amendments to the agenda?
Just a question, who's running number 8?
Number 8.
Who's speaking to that? Oh, okay. Because I was not prepared.
Okay, that's cool.
Then I make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second, can I ask a discussion question just about the agenda itself? I'm still been confused all along, like you just asked the question about what is number 8. we end up with this stuff? Because, I mean, it would be nice to be, or are we sort of talking about what we would like this to be on the agenda, and then, because, I mean, yeah, I'm not there. I'm with you in the same boat.
Those are being directed to us.
So those are, yeah, it's being, the upcoming items is what's coming down the pipe. It's just, yeah, there's no
It's a heads
homework
up.
involved in that section. Yeah, it's a heads up so that we can do our homework. So that's what we're trying to do, is be more proactive about the issues coming down the pipe. So this is where that section is, so that we can do homework in the future. This is a part of that increasing communication and transparency tool.
That's what the whole section needed about.
Correct.
That makes more sense than you. Thank you very much.
If I may too, just to clarify the issue of referrals from town council, I will be asking, and I've spoken with the town manager, but not town council, I will be asking town council to add to their agendas a referral section, just so it's clear exactly when the referral is made. And Ms. Linda is correct, under the statutes, it says that the referral then is considered complete, if you will, at the next meeting of the planning commission after the referral. So that would be very clear then when town council is making that referral, because it would actually be on the agenda.
Okay. Yes, so now we can, yeah, but we're all trying to get better at what we're doing. Yeah, that's really what it boils down to. Yes, so that's what we're doing, is we're making incremental steps towards improvement. Yeah, I see nods out there, that's good. So, all right, so we're, honestly, this is all hard work.
Yes, we need improvement.
Yeah, anyways, okay, so, we got a second, can we get a vote on that? Yes.
This is for the approval of the agenda.
Yes.
Aye.
So,
Aye.
Aye.
chair votes aye. Okay, so we'll, first order of business is approval of minutes from last month.
I just had a correction on there, just one thing.
Sure.
Under committee reports, it says, discussion of recommending council to form a registration, and it was actually a registry. So that, and that's different from, just registering. So that this registry would be available to anyone, and maybe we could even post this registry on the town's website that identifies those that are providing short-term rentals.
Okay. Any
So
other,
registry.
any other changes, amendments, additions?
Just a clarification of that section, I thought we were darn formal in that section, and we actually voted to recommend to council, right? This kind of looks kind of
Yeah.
conversationally.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things that came out, which was.
Yeah, it was a lot of work.
There was a specific, I thought, motion and second, and we said.
So, yeah, that was
being
on.
something we were forwarding, right?
Right.
And it
So
just sort of shows up in
so-
committee reports as kind of
Yeah.
a discussion item, but there's no actual, we had an action there. That's not really showing up.
Yeah, and, yeah, I remember that, as, a formalized process whereby, I provided a draft of the language, and Mr. Shaw, if you're still there, I think you said that, that was a pretty complete draft. And we could move forward with that as at least, something we could provide to the town council.
Mr. Chairman, I would request if the planning commission would do so, to defer approval of the minutes until your July 18th meeting. And we'll go back and listen to the recording and make sure we capture that accurately.
Okay.
I would like to make a motion to defer the approval of the minutes until
Second.
18th.
Second.
With the request for, minutes in their briefest form are just, what we're talking about missing, which is an actual, motion and action and that sort of thing. One of the pieces that we were sort of missing that came out of what our homework is coming up for this next meeting was we fed a bunch of questions to the Berkeley group. I'm not understanding that the Berkeley group wasn't working for us anymore. So does somebody have the list of, they were doing due diligence and taking good notes through the meeting, we were not.
And they
I
provided
have good notes.
provided that to us, and then the only thing that wasn't incorporated into the draft was the information that we forwarded to you regarding other jurisdictions with an overlay, so that was sent to you. Everything else that they sent to us was incorporated into the draft that you have. They were edits.
There was one exception,
Okay.
and that is that in definitions, We talked about how that, they talked about, the affordable housing for income ranges that was vague, and I'm gonna get you the exact language on that. And we talked about creating a definition section and putting that in the definition section.
Your definitions are in Article 20.
Yeah,
and that has been revisited and that will be coming to you.
It wasn't definitions for the PUD, it was definitions for the
Or
ordinance.
yeah,
Correct. That's coming.
which would include, yeah, and that's coming.
That's the coming soon section for next time. That's not going to be included in the PUD. Okay.
No, the question is not about including the PUD, but having that actually reflected that that's something that we wanted to have happen, which was, we wanted the definitions piece to get fixed, even though it was on a different track than the PUD piece.
Correct.
That would be good to be reflected, so that then council understood that that's sort of something we were hoping that it would get addressed the way you were suggesting addressing it.
And so that's right there under upcoming topics, number 8, so we can move on that / discuss further there.
Right, no, I was just saying, as they're making modifications, to things, give us another crack at this, if that can be in there. And then the other part is, if you said you had a tabulation of what the questions from the birthday group is, can you take that back to us too? Just.
It wasn't questions, they were edits.
Yeah.
You said that we asked questions, they wrote them down, you have that list, and then you addressed them and the edits. Could we?
Everything they sent back to me were just edits. The
Yeah,
only thing that
so
they
the
sent back
Berkeley
to
group
me.
took the
Well, like
questions.
the cultural
and the
or
comments.
architectural
Right.
findings, I think you included that.
Yes, everything they sent back to me were straight edits, except for the links to the other jurisdictions, the overlays. And so I forwarded that because that was not an edit, it was not something incorporated. And so I sent that on to
We
you. So I
didn't
have
send this
that.
for, I'm just looking for a section that says, we asked the Berkeley group for the following, right? Because there was a lot of back and forth, right? And they were doing tasking. And then then the response may be, and they did that, and it's all incorporated in the draft. But just asking for that part to be clear, that like, this is what we want.
I think we had a full listing of everything that Joe mentioned to the Berkeley group during that meeting.
Yeah. So it comes up in some of the revision comments, but in the, that's where I'm seeing. There's a couple.
Yeah, we talked about what is considered buildable, and, how we're gonna count that as part of
So
the acreage.
that's what we go to document so that we understand when people are saying like, y'all have talked about X, Y, and Z, then we can actually have something that says, this is the stuff we talked about. And that way people can go like, oh, it did do blah.
Right, okay, so, but that's what we're talking about, is it's incumbent upon us to really create that, because the Berkeley group is no longer engaged with us. So they took all of their notes.
Is
and
the
made
us like the
edits.
commission was doing, or the us are the staff?
Largely,
Yes.
yes, largely, you and I, and the commission. So
So for future, if you ask a question, you should write it down.
basically, short version,
Well, we have the audio.
yes, and we do have the audio, we can review if you're so inclined.
I listened to it.
Revisit that 3-hour portion.
Good on you.
Yes. Okay, so, the motion before us is to defer the approval of minutes to the, newly scheduled July 18th meeting. And we had second, so any further discussion? Okay, can you do a verbal vote?
Aye.
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 Aye. Sounds good. Okay, so the next on the agenda is public comment on non-hearing related planning commission matters. Do we have any time up for public comment?
I do have an email though for the,
For the public, okay, so, for
just so you know.
A new one that we haven't heard?
For the
It's
public
for the
hearing,
RC, the text amendment.
yeah, for the public hearing on the RC, which is next on the agenda.
Right.
But the non-hearing related matters, we have no comments or comment. For,
Oh, the public hearing.
for the public hearing, this is everything but the public hearing. Any other discussion? Okay, all right, moving right along. So, at, 8:17, we're going to go ahead and commence the public hearing on the public, regarding potential text amendment to conditional use in the resort commercial RC zoning district. Yes. With that summary, let's see. I just want to get like a summary on that.
Yeah.
Basically, what's happening is we're looking at a potential text amendment to change conditional use in the resort commercial district of theaters. Theaters with a maximum permitted occupancy of no more than 70 persons. In putting that into permitted uses by right versus conditional use permits. And then for the conditional use permit section, adding a number 11, theaters with a maximum permitted occupancy of 70 or more would have to go through a conditional use permit. So
It's actually more than.
more than 70 needs a conditional use permit. 70 or less is a by right. Okay.
I think we discussed this in detail at our last two meetings.
Yeah.
She don't remember. She said you were going.
Yes, Mr. Shaw.
Mr. Howell, members of the planning commission, Ms. Giles, wasn't there a comment that from the public as it relates to this and then needs to be read into the record?
Yes, we are going to commence public comment now because we have 2 signups in person, and then we'll go ahead and read in the electronic communication after that.
Okay, I just want to make sure you didn't jump the gun on it.
Thank you. I appreciate that help.
Yes.
All right, Miss Mary Larson. Just as a reminder, everybody has 3 minutes, and please state your name and address for everybody.
Oh, I won't be talking that long.
Okay.
My name's Mary Larson, and I have property at 1310 Bancroft. And then my husband and I also live in Colonial Beach, but not in the actual town. We'll be moving onto Bancroft at August 1st. But right now we live in Shellfield, just past Shady Lane Seafood. So good evening. My husband and I have been volunteering for the Colonial Beach Playhouse almost since the very beginning. And we think that having a theater in the downtown area has been a big plus for the community. And we think that all of the shows, even those at the community center, before they had them at Hawthorne, have brought in people from out of town. And those people, they come and they stay at the hotels and the motels, and they eat at all the restaurants, and they support the community. And it also supports the people who live here, because the Playhouse has events and plays year round, not just during the tourist season, which for us, I think is probably one of the most important reasons that we need that theater in town. And so we're hoping that you all will support this amendment. Well, what's it called? It's a long word. The text amendment to the resort commercial zoning ordinance. So we hope that you all will support that, because we really want the town to support a community theater. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mr. Muller?
My name's Mike Moeller. I live at 117 Riverview Circle. And if I'm being redundant, please, let me know, but I haven't read the Berkeley report. And only thing that I'd like to ask is that you devote the necessary time to addressing public safety issues, because given our recent experience with the Westmoreland County Board of Supervisors and our rescue squad, that's going to be a big deal. And it'll be a big deal to also the fire department, and the state has agencies that may in fact be able to give you, they were talking about ratios earlier as it relates to population. you may be able to get that kind of information. And if Mr. Moncure is the liaison with public safety, you may want to use members of the board, the town council to do that, but I would also involve Supervisor Trivett in that. Public safety is a big deal to me, and I do know healthcare is something that's seriously lacking in this town, and those are issues that clearly need to be addressed. So that's what I have.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
For just a quick clarity, with the permission of the chair, technically this was sort of in the wrong place. Can we, for the sake of the minutes, the future minutes that will be developing that, just consider that as part of the prior item on the agenda?
Yes.
It happens a lot.
And then, the
It
last,
should, if we're clear, now, your minutes are your record. It's like a court order. That's how you speak through your minutes. So they should accurately reflect where that, where statements are made, but you can consider those comments, you can certainly take that into account as you deliberate. But there's not a lot of latitude to move things around, because again, that is your official record and that is how you speak.
okay, yes.
Not, and just to clarify, because some people think it's the audio and it's not. Your official document is your adopted minutes.
Right, so we won't move, we'll just consider them under the general public comment portion of the meeting.
Yes, you can consider it and take it and consider it in your deliberations, however you choose.
Great.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And,
May I ask a question? May I ask a question?
yes, Mr. Shaw. Yes, Mr. Shaw.
Oh, I hope we didn't lose him.
That's his question.
You muted yourself.
That's short, and sweet.
Sorry, Mr. Howell, and Ms. Giles, I'm going to ask a question here. And if you have included comments that this gentleman has made are unrelated to the public hearing that's identified in number 5, and you consider them for public, to include them in the public comment on non-hearing related planning commission matters, he's commenting on a public hearing matter.
Yes, in the most technical sense of the word, but yeah. Okay, thank you, Mr. Shaw. Can you please read in the electronic correspondence for us?
Can somebody find me?
Yeah, I got you on the phone.
Okay, thank you. Sir or madam, as I may be unable to attend the planning commission meeting where this matter is heard, I would like to ask that my comment be read in support of Colonial Beach Players Association.
Just a point of order to the chair, could we redo the timer? I also.
Yeah, okay.
Let me just.
Yeah.
I don't know if you need to get on the mic or just get physically closer to us.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, much
Okay.
better. Thank you.
Sorry.
All right, starting the clock.
Yeah, who is it from?
I didn't get to that part yet, but I will be. Sir or madam, as I may be unable to attend the planning commission meeting where this matter is heard, I would like to ask that my comment be read in support of the Colonial Beach Players Association. My name is Bucky Doer and I live at 206 Mimosa Avenue. From the mid-1980s until 1998, I created and ran a community theater company called Great Upstairs Theater for Children and Youth. It was at 106 Hawthorne above what was then the town library at 106 Hawthorne Street. Until recently, it was the Chamber of Commerce building. A town ordinance was passed declaring it the town's only resident theater company, with all the reasonable code restrictions applicable thereto. In 1998, I bought the building next door and ran my business of furniture repair and reupholstery there for the next 10 years. 2 years ago, I sold that building to the creators of the Colonial Beach Players Association, and they have converted the space into a seriously upscale little theater. The performing arts are a boon for our community. It showcases our town's amazing local talent and draws us into a common and uplifting gathering place where we can indulge in a bit of healthy escapism. I do thank the Planning Commission for making our zoning code a little friendlier, and I do hope this text amendment will be approved. Bucky Doer.
Okay. That concludes the public comment section of the hearing. Do we have any discussion amongst the planning commissioners? Any further discussion on this?
Yeah, thank you. And you're gonna close the public hearing?
After we're done with our comment and conversation. The public comment section of the hearing is closed, yes.
So,
We did it
are you
generally last
asking
time.
for discussion on public comments? I'm
no.
lost as to what you're
If
asking.
there is any other discussion regarding the potential text amendment.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think we have to make a motion to do something.
You don't have,
Follow that.
you don't have to, you can discuss it as.
I
you don't
would
have
like to make
but
a
I mean,
motion
Okay.
that we approve the cup as it's,
For the
stands.
text amendment?
I'm sorry, the text amendment.
As proposed.
As proposed, yes.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Do we have any discussion about that?
Oh, yeah, I got it. And you know I was going here. So, yeah. I didn't see this agenda item up. For the folks that are here and for the folks that have commented publicly, I first wanted to state that I am not in disagreement with anything that's being said in terms of wanting a theater, believing in the theater, believing this is an asset to the town, but wanting to clarify the fact that we already have a process for this. So this is sort of a wonky exercise that the planning commission is being asked to do to remove its ability to review permanently, its ability to review theaters as a category. So just like what folks would have seen through the Dodson process earlier about, we have sort of a generic, like, you can just do this, but you must ask permission. And I think that was like not exactly the simplest piece. I think this, for this particular use, would be fairly simple to go through the process where you just say, can I do this? Right, and that process is already allowed. What this is asking is so that we cannot comment or have any sort of meaningful feedback on one of them, three of them, right? Whether they're on, this part of the RC or that part of the RC, or whether, two of them are next to each other, or whether they're farther apart. And I think the reason that, that it's distinct from other uses is the nature of what theaters are like, in terms of not what's going on in the theater, what's going on, which is what our lane is the adjacent uses question, right? So with the process as it currently stands, we can opine on whether or not we think that it is an unreasonable burden on the other existing things in the RC, and decide whether things should be modified or decide like just it's a great idea. It's sort of the same process we're always in. This is a request to say, we would like that oversight on the behalf of the public, because that's what we're sort of hoping to represent, to be removed. And this just sort of just happened within the RC zone, not for a theater, but for all future uses to be removed. So this is part of my confusion in this, which is that this is not a theater. I think everybody knows which theater we're talking about. It's not a request for whether that theater gets greenlit or not. It's a request to eliminate them having to ask whether or not that popular idea would go through at this point, and in the process, change the future as well. So
I just want to say that, don't forget that this is for a theater of 70 or less. And if it's 71 or more, then we do have that option.
And either way, the town would still have oversight. You can't just randomly in the dark, boom, hey, look, I've got a theater and we can do everything we want to do. There's still permitting kinds of things that go on.
You're talking about that could be somebody else's job. I'm saying
That's the town's job.
Folks previous to us decided that this use is different enough from other uses that it's worth a second glance, right? It wasn't a denied thing. It was just like all these other listings. It's worth a second glance, and it's a fairly, other than since we're not talking about building and changing multiple use things, and this is not analogous to what we had earlier tonight. This is a pretty simple process. And so we're talking about eliminating that for the sake of saying that we want something now, but there's already a process for that. And that's where I think this gets lost, because it looks like, are we trying to say yes or no to the one thing that we're trying to do now? But I really get concerned about that as precedent for us, because I would be hard pressed for other categories to come in here and say it's easier public policy process to change the code. It's a lighter lift to change the code than it is to actually go through the review process. Because I think that ends up being ripe for abuse, sort of in the long run, as it can be sort of presented that all there has to be at that particular moment in time is enough folks who want to change the entire text. And that's my concern, is that like, this is the easiest thing to do if we sort of go down this road as president. Because the easiest thing to do is to just come in and ask to change the code. And I don't think we would have gone that way with other uses, but I don't know how I can look at this list.
If you could give me just a second, I think you're wrong in that this is not the easier path. I think the easier path is a cut. Because it's a form. You fill out the form, you answer the questions, bing, bang, boom, you're done. So to take the effort to have done this, I think was not the easier path. And regardless of all of that, I think you probably made your point very well, and that the best way to get it most thoroughly in the record is for us to take a vote on the motion.
As long as we're finished with comment. Okay. Mr. Ailes?
Aye.
Ms. Luna?
Aye.
Mr. Knuckles?
Nay.
Mr. Christensen?
I abstain due to possible conflict of interest.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. So we'll make the recommendation as presented to council for adoption of text amendment to the Marcy zone. Next up on the agenda is committee reports. Do we have any updates from committees?
I did want to say that the Resiliency Committee was referenced in an article that came out, I think it was Monday, about the work that RAFT has done in our community. And it's been posted on the town's website.
Nice.
And it has also been put on social media. So it's just an opportunity for us to get more information out there about climate change and the impact of that on our, on our community and the flooding and erosion, those kind of things. So I was happy to see that article come out.
And it would be, hopefully we did not have a meeting this past month, but we're hoping that we can have one in the next month. And as a predecessor to that, it would be ideal if we can get a briefing from staff on where we stand with the grant that was received last year and sort of how basically the rest of the calendar year sort of looks as it relates to that work stream to figure out. I guess there's a sort of a wish list that we have of like things that we want back. We'll not do everything, but we'd like to have a better understanding of what things are essentially already in the effectively done box, even though they haven't happened yet, right? But going to happen.
Sure.
That would be great.
And which committee is this?
So the Resilience Committee.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, a briefing on the Resilience Planning Grant that was awarded in November.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Community Development Flood Fund, Preparedness Fund grant.
Okay. And is this just because I'm there, is this appointed by Planning Commission?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so just reminder, your meetings have to be noticed.
They're here.
Yeah.
No, they have to be noticed under FOIA, so make sure that Heather knows.
Yes, they
We've
are.
done a good job of that based on your recommendation.
Just a reminder.
And the next one already has been noticed.
Yes, that's perfect.
That process is actually working
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
Good. I try to keep everybody, all of us out of trouble.
But thanks for the reminder.
Appreciate it.
And thank you for that.
Yes.
And then the short-term rental draft ordinance that we worked on, would like to see, what the impact of that is. Are we going to move forward with doing that? So
So the short-term rental, that whole issue, it's really not a planning commission. So if the scope of your,
it was referred to us by the council.
right, so your scope would be, if you want to make recommendations about where, that would be allowed in the zoning districts. So things like registries, that's not a planning
Okay.
commission item.
Just to,
So, and the way I have it at the moment is as far as draft, and you can say, no, I don't want to do it that way, but it's under the chapter 20. And so I can talk about that now, Mr. Chairman, or when we get to item 8.
Yeah, so, well, okay, so that's enough for committee reports. Do we have any other topics?
Yeah, no, only related to your question, which is, I think part of your question was, when are things that we're working on at committee levels or even as the whole body, how do we figure out when those things get slotted in and when there isn't room for them? And I don't need an answer to that now, but if we could just have some thought about how do we figure out our workflow?
And I think that's a part of what this new upcoming items is, and we're going to be thoughtful about how we determine that, because it needs to be explicit, and I agree with that. So, yeah, thank you. On that note, I think that's enough other topics. So upcoming items.
Yes, so in chapter 20, to address Ms. Lonan's question, the way I have it drafted now, and I actually looked at this today with Mr. Shaw, is, and based on some feedback I've gotten at the council level as well, which is short-term rentals. There was at present, and again, you can recommend otherwise, but to allow that wherever residential uses are allowed. So the two ways to do that, accomplish that, is you can amend each and every district where it's residential, or, and this is the approach that I've taken because it seemed to be much cleaner, to amend the definitions to include short-term rentals. So where it says dwelling, single family attached, I just added a comma, including to what the definition is there, comma, including short-term rentals of this dwelling or any portion thereof. And then single family detached, blah, 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 comma, including short-term rental of, and then short-term rental is defined as it is in the state code. So that's rather than going through each and every zoning district, because that, and so what that would do is capture wherever you have residential usage, it would include the short-term rental of that dwelling.
And just to be clear, to make sure, since this has been thoroughly hashed over in the RC district and a reserved commercial, when we have a CUP that designates something as mixed use, can you just make sure we get mixed use residential in there too?
It would, all of that would be pulled in because what you're allowing.
Or in the inverse, we could exclude it from that district.
You could, if you could make a change specific to a certain district, that is correct. Or you could recommend.
I was gonna say,
Town council then
Would make the change.
Ultimately decide how they want to, what they want to do.
So do we understand that short-term rental is not going to be defined on its own, it's only going to be defined within the changes that we would make that you were just suggesting for specific uses?
In Article 20 to the definitions. And so therefore, so like when I do bring that, assuming you're okay with that approach, when I do bring that, if you decide you want to exclude townhouses from that, you could exclude it from that definition. But you could also then take the other approach and say, no, we want to look at district by district by district.
Some of the houseboats are being used for short-term rentals.
You don't regulate them.
Yes.
Okay.
So I just wanted to, look at it broadly.
You regulate, the town regulates the land.
Mhm.
Now,
We don't have anything to do.
Now, having said that, there are other ways you can regulate personal property, you, the town. But as the planning commission, you regulate land.
Right. So is my understanding that you're saying that we need to affirmatively put it in each of these uses, because lacking that, like today, it is disallowed because it's not affirmatively listed? Or?
No, it's not addressed. I'm not, and I'm suggesting that you not go through district by district by district, because that's very cumbersome. I'm suggesting that we do it in Article 20 through the definitions, and then it takes care of it. So it weaves its way through where residences are allowed.
And that draft
In whatever
will be available for review at such time that's appropriate.
I'm on board with that.
It's just
that sounds very
trying to.
The
before, but
easiest
there
path
will be-
forward.
short-term rental, and then inside of all the different dwelling types that are residential, we will reference short-term rental.
Until it's defined, does it exist?
It
Like,
does
is there no
exist.
distinction between short and long-term rental under the status quo, or is there, since we don't define it?
It isn't specifically addressed, but it is not prohibited. So you would be hard pressed to go in tomorrow and kick everybody out because it's not prohibited either. So but adding it is smart because, I mean, it's sort of a new development in our, in the country, in the world. So it's smart to add it and to address it and talk about it. Because there may come a time when you want to go back and look at each district and that sort of thing.
So at the moment, it's just a rental, and we can make it a category of short-term rental. That's what you're saying.
It's really for clarification, honestly, and some jurisdictions use it for registries and things like that. Registries, that begs the question about who's gonna do that. So staff has already taxed a bit. So the idea on the table at the moment is to add that as a part of the business license and be done with it. Add maybe a page or something along those lines, to the extent that people want to, and this is a conversation that I've had briefly, but would really need to develop with Ms. Efko, the Economic Development Director, to the extent that the town could assist in, or provide some sort of avenue to encourage that or help or market, or, if that's a benefit to the town, perhaps we could do that. But otherwise, the goal at the moment, the thinking, is with the least additional taxing on the resources of the town, but to do what we can do to help. And they're supposed to have a business license, and so I think there was also not a desire to impose an additional large fee for this type of activity.
Because the business license itself has a fee associated with it based on assumed, if you haven't had any yet, assumed gross income, or if you have, based on previous gross income.
Right.
So that's where your fee comes from.
And so that process also, as far as tracking, that was another thing that was brought up, and identifying and collecting these fees, that process is kind of already there with the business license avenue. And then there are other, if we really wanted to get a better handle on that inventory in the town, there are consulting types of agencies that are groups that will do that for a very nominal fee from what I'm seeing. They'll just tell you, hey, in your jurisdiction, you have these, and these data analytics folks, right?
Well,
that
and if we've added it to our town code, then won't places like Airbnb and things like that, if it's, if we have a tax associated with the business license portion of it or whatever, won't they automatically start paying us those appropriate taxes?
What I'm saying, because I think you're all aware that I just came here from representing people all over the state.
Mm-hmm.
The problem that I've been seeing is that Airbnb will put it into their system, and as you can imagine, everything is programmed in and automated this day and age.
Yeah.
And they will collect it from the people. They are not really good, from what I'm seeing, at sending it to you.
Oh.
They're very good at adding and programming it in and getting it.
But not at giving it away.
Right, and then where are they? They're somewhere in, wherever, yes. Yes.
That's correct, somewhere in there.
Yes.
It's an interesting process of council amends chapter 20 to just put in concepts of short-term rentals, then it can come back to us and we can start to look at where to apply that specifically. Is that, but we can't do anything until they've done.
You can, and so, and unless or until you recommend something otherwise, it would apply to wherever residential dwelling, be it attached, single family detached, multifamily, it would apply wherever those exist now. So if you have someplace that somebody could live, they could also then rent it short term. But you could remove it from one of those definitions for your recommendation. You could say, no, I don't like that approach at all. I do want to go district by district by district. You can do that as well. For purposes of getting something on paper for discussion, I took that approach out of the gate. But again, if you want to change that, that's okay.
This is where I'm confused. Are we asking them to sort of stick it in and affirmatively make it everywhere? And then our next step is to look at whether it's appropriate to change that concept, or is nothing going to happen until we get to the, this is where.
There will be a proposed text amendment. We will yay, nay, add, subtract, or agree. And then at that point, we'll make a recommendation to council.
So where we were last month, part of the brain cells up, where we were recommending moving forward with the registry, that process has really held hostage because we haven't done this.
Well, it's outside of our
We're saying we haven't done that other piece of homework, so that homework has to happen first.
The registry will not.
Registry is out of our purview, because that's a council issue. That is
The
not.
data from that was supposed to help inform our.
Right.
Right, but I'm saying like, we can't get that information until chapter 20 definitions are done, and somebody then, after that happens, then says, we want a registry, not us, but like people. Can't.
Yeah. So
They have to do those two
we
pieces
push that up to
before
them.
the information can come back to us.
Well, the information about, people are supposed to be getting a business license now.
Yeah, and at that point, what we're trying to do is empower council by making a text amendment to the definitions. That is our function in this process. So anything above and beyond the empowerment and giving them the tools is purview of the council.
So we have to do the recommendation to text amendments without the data that the registry that we talked about is going to provide. That's what I'm. So that's what I'm just
Well,
making
it's-
sure.
it's-
It sounds like we can't get.
You're going too
we can't get the data.
Yeah,
You're going too deep.
Yeah.
So I think what you need to do is provide the approvals for the definition changes, right?
Right.
Then council can act on those items, which would then trigger, if council so chooses, a registry for staff to do that, or for them to implement a new application piece for short-term rentals specifically. So they are tied together, but your function is to agree to put the new text amendment for short-term rentals. Then the council will then determine yea or nay, and then they will determine if staff should, one, provide a registry or any of the other functions to solidify that. So adding the extra information for the short-term rentals to collect the fee, or, use it however they choose, for staff to do, not necessarily for this commission to do.
And if there's further zoning or whatever changes that they think might be applicable, then they would kick that back and go.
Yes.
And then we would continue to deal with it.
Yes.
Because after the fact, they say, you know what, we don't want zoning in residential, commercial, blah, 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 to have short-term rentals. Well, then that would be something that you would go back and review to determine if it's applicable, if it's financially available, satisfied for the town, all that, that would be your body to determine that. And then you would provide your recommendation back to council and say, we don't think that's a great idea because you're going to lose $500,000 or something, whatever. So that would be the function where we would kick it back and make the determination if rezoning it or putting it in a certain zone or taking out of a certain zone makes sense.
I'm too tired to talk about this anymore. Steve or Vicky, could you just explain to me the workflow offline sometime?
Okay, yes.
I don't think I'm gonna get it.
Okay, no, that's fine.
Okay.
So I guess the last thing on up and coming is affordable housing overlay district.
Yeah, one, part of the discussion that came out of the PUD ordinance was talking about the affordable housing issue, and the examples that the Berkeley group provided were overlay districts. And which triggered other comments which said, that's a great idea, because we don't want to limit our affordable housing to just the PUD. It would be nice if it were everywhere, if people were encouraged, because the way it generally, and I'm going to overgeneralize a little bit, but generally the way it works is you can incentivize but not require affordable housing. So the way these example ordinances that were forwarded by the Berkeley group work is that incentives are provided wherever, in whatever districts are included in your overlay. For example, reduced tap fees. If you build something that's an affordable housing, the town could say, we're going to subsidize that in the form of expedited permits, reduced tap fees, reduced permit fees for whatever that we we do, to encourage people potentially to build affordable housing. So if you do an overlay, it goes beyond, and it also prevents you from, once again, going district by district by district and opening up every single chapter, that relates to anything. You could determine this, your overlay, you can make it the whole town. And just say, hey, anybody who's willing to do this, we would welcome that, we want that. So that's the idea behind the affordable housing overlay. And toward that end, affordable housing is included in the chapter 20 definitions.
I find it, helpful to have the overlay district, and I wanted to say that when I was served in Arlington on the Housing Commission, we created an overlay there. And we were able to give, incentives to developers, bonus density, setback, requirements that were less restrictive, and those kind of things. So I think they work, but our problem here is that there's nowhere really in the districts other than the PUD where we have an opportunity for a developer to maybe want to look at those incentives and utilize that. So, we might not see many units come out of that, but it's still worthwhile.
I'm not clear how an overlay works. Does it overlay an entire district or a certain geographic area?
It's easiest if you, well, it has to. It's easiest if you go district by district. That way your lines are clean, right? And you don't have, it doesn't have to, but it's very clean if you do it that way. So if you stick to boundaries of districts. And let's just say you choose 3 of your districts and you want certain things to be true in just those 3 districts. You create this additional overlay, and you say it includes this district and this district and this district. And in those 3 districts, we're going to have reduced or increased density. We're going to allow you increased density if you provide affordable housing. We're going to give you whatever incentives or whatever things that you want to be true in that district. Sometimes they are tax districts. That's something different.
I'm still not quite clear. Could it be in one R2 district but not another R2 district, or would it be?
Yes, we did that in Arlington.
But R2,
It just depends on how you classify it.
Yeah, in Arlington, we circled on the map the Roslyn Metro corridor, and that would, crossed over more than one district, but it was like a circle on the map.
Okay, so maybe a district is different than a zone in this context.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, that's where I'm screwed up.
Okay. All right, so.
And my one last question, and honestly, this is the last thing for tonight. So in our PUD, we had talked about putting that language of what defines affordable housing or workforce housing as definitions. But I wanted to ensure that we keep that same line in the PUD text amendment that reads provide affordable housing opportunity for residents as defined in section 20 of our code. Okay, and then we talked about the defining workforce housing like the way Westmoreland County does, or our metropolitan statistical area, which includes Washington. But so that it's in ranges, and it could be, I don't like to use 40% because we have 40% of the area median income pretty much covered in our deeply subsidized units already. But I would like to see it from 60 to 120% of our area median income. And that also falls in line with the low-income housing tax credit program in the state of Virginia, which often funds these developments.
Which would be a fantastic thing to put in definitions for affordable housing.
That's what we just said.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yeah. Good home for it.
Thank you, I'm done.
I like the topic that we're working at in terms of looking at housing types that we don't have and trying to find ways of incentivizing them. But I also like to try to get real, to try to about like where we're talking about, because otherwise we end up having to sort of push back on a lot of things that are never going to happen, right?
Yeah.
So I really have no interest in talking about having an affordable housing overlay in a residential neighborhood that might have like 1 or 2 buildable lots left in it, because that all you're gonna do is freak people out going like, what are you talking about doing, like an apartment building in my backyard, right? And the answer is no, it's not what's gonna happen, right? Because there's not gonna be enough offsets for a developer to come in and go like, yeah, I want to do it that way, because it's just too darn small. So really, I think, let's just be real about the fact, we're talking about larger tracts of land. And if we do that, then maybe we can sort of avoid the worry, because there is, and I think that you may have seen some of this before, when you start talking about putting lower price point housing in established neighborhoods where that's really going to be an outlier, folks get worried, even if it's not economically viable for it to happen. It just sort of comes out that says like, this is what we want to happen, that's why we put the overlay district.
We're also talking about.
So we just sort of like skip the public fight over something that you don't think will ever happen.
Absolutely, and this is a great opportunity for us to do some homework to have those discussions at a later time. Heads up on the topics.
Well,
we don't have to dive into this.
I mean, the general topic though, I thought was like whether we're gonna do something, the scope of what we're gonna do in the future is town-wide or narrow. And it sounded like there was a leaning towards town-wide, and I was like, maybe that's gonna cause us more work, but have no better policy.
So pre any of this, before we go down the road, we need to make sure that there's an appetite for council to be receptive to any kind of recommendation on this. Right, because we can make recommendations if council, there's no appetite at council level. This is something that has been,
you mean first council or?
Yeah, town council.
They
love it. On the town council level, then it's the expenditure of resources without a return. So that's the first step before we get too far, and that's probably the better place to start with these conversations with the upcoming items. Is there an appetite for the topic generally, and then as we move forward, we can get into more specifics as they appear on the agenda in the future, once it's been more formalized and we have actual staff recommendations and research and all that kind of stuff. But this is just a, hey, heads up, let's start noodling about this stuff. If you are so inclined to do a little bit of research, and then at least, try and be informed on what we have now, if we have anything at all. And then that way, at least when it comes teed up, we're just not caught flat-footed. That's what my interpretation of the upcoming items is. So just we'll clarify that as the tool.
So we'll get another opportunity to talk about this overlay.
Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So things that came
It's just
from
things
town
are so
council that
rushed.
they're asking us to look at, or things that we're talking about
So
ourselves?
These are things that will be coming to us.
Both is the answer. Both of those scenarios are true with this.
And Mr. Chairman, that's actually a good reason also to have items on town council agenda and have them referred.
Right.
And if they don't refer it back, there's no appetite issue.
Exactly. So that's sort of a great.
But we can initiate things too.
That's what she's
Yeah.
saying. So our referral, adding that to, yes, the council agenda, planning commission referrals. Hey, are you guys interested in us doing this topic? That's what we're trying to get at. So I think that's a great.
I don't understand why I can't understand. So I'm tired. I
Yeah,
apologize.
no, that's good.
But I still don't understand. Did A and B come from town council? That somebody said, hey, could you stick this on your agenda and talk about this tonight? Or are these things that we're trying to talk about amongst ourselves to ask Mr. Allison to go back and see if they have any appetite?
Yes. B. A was from council. B is from us.
And sometimes they'll come from staff. I mean,
Yeah,
if
right.
if we come across something that is a hot button issue, we'll bring it to you and
That would
say,
be helpful. if
Or an
we
applicant.
Identified.
The origin.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's part of us trying to refine these rules. So,
Yeah, we'll get better.
yes. But for tonight, as you mentioned a couple of times,
I
think we're done. Can I get a motion?
I would like to make a motion.
to recess, a motion to recess to.
A motion.
I'm sorry, I would like to make a
apologize.
motion
to
to recess
until
until,
July 18th.
yes,
Second.
At 6 o'clock.
at 6 o'clock in the evening.
Okay, second, can I get a vote on that?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Chair votes aye, and that concludes our meeting.